returning to the dilapidated military factory of the 1980s, when foreign experts pointed at our noses and mocked us, claiming we could not build an engine in 50 years. You simply waved your hand and had the workers set up shop, using high-pressure pots to cook those iron scraps. All because the aero-engine system was activated in your mind. Even without the foreigners' machinery, we could hand-forge single crystal hollow blades that shocked the world, turning the foreign blockade into a total joke. At this moment, Chen Zheng clutched his throbbing head and forced his eyes open. He was completely stunned. Everywhere he looked were mottled, peeling green-painted walls. The air was thick with a musty, old-fashioned scent. Everyone around him was dressed in 1980s style, wearing blue coarse cloth work uniforms, rushing forward with faces covered in dust and grime. He looked down at himself. His hands were rough, with indelible black oil stains deeply embedded in his knuckles. How is this possible? He clearly remembered that as the nation's top aero-engine master, he had just closed his eyes in the ICU. How did everything change in a blink? Before he could wrap his head around it, a ding echoed in his brain. Great power aero-engine system successfully bound. Current host status healthy. Core functions activated. All-dimensional engine. Fault scanning and blueprint inference matrix. Hearing the voice in his head, Chen Zheng became fully alert. He had been reborn. Back to the year 1986. Back to the scene he could never forget for the rest of his life. The explosion during the domestic turbofan core engine test. In his past life, this very explosion blew the entire plant's hard work to pieces. The domestic aero-engine project was nearly scrapped, leaving Dragon Nation's fighter jets for a long time, forced to rely on imported engines just to get by. His fellow workers shouted in panic, "Quick, get the dry powder extinguishers. Shut off the fuel lines and the power, hurry." They charged in, clutching fire extinguishers. White powder sprayed everywhere, making everyone choke and cough. Director Wang Jiangguo's forehead was slashed by a piece of shattered glass. Blood streamed down his face. He did not even bother to wipe it, staring deathly at the scrap metal emitting black smoke in the test bed. His eyes were bloodshot, and his fists were clenched so hard they cracked. Chief Engineer Zhao Deming's legs went weak, and he slumped onto the floor covered in dry powder and glass shards. His hands shook uncontrollably. He muttered through trembling lips, "It is over. It is all over. 3 years of hard work. Single quote, tens of millions in funding. Single quote, it has all gone down the drain now." The atmosphere in the test hall was devastatingly low. Several young technicians squatted on the ground, burying their faces in their hands. At that moment, the sound of leather shoes crunching on broken glass rang out. Smith, the technical consultant sent from abroad, wearing a pristine gray suit, walked in with his hands in his pockets. Behind him followed a translator wearing glasses. Smith looked at the total mess on the floor, curled his lip, his face full of mockery. He rattled off a string of words in his own language. The translator nearby quickly cleared his throat and translated loudly, "Director Wang, Chief Zhao, Mr. Smith says he warned you long ago. Your industrial foundation is simply too poor. You can't even figure out basic high-temperature materials. Yet you delude yourselves into developing an advanced turbofan engine. This is nothing but a huge joke." Wang Jiangguo whirled his head around in a rage. Staring fixedly at Smith, he roared through gritted teeth that their materials had undergone rigorous testing, and were definitely not the problem. After Smith heard the translation, his eyebrows shot up high. He said sarcastically, "Testing? What could you possibly measure with that obsolete equipment of yours? This closed-door approach of yours is nothing but a waste of money with no meaningful results. Take my advice. Just give up. Be realistic and buy our civilian engines. Just go back and stick to simple assembly. As for military-grade turbofans, you won't build one even in 50 years." The moment those words were spoken, the workers in the control room reached their breaking point. Someone roared, asking what kind of foreign nonsense Chen was spewing. They shouted that they would build their own engines sooner or later. Several young men rolled up their sleeves, ready to charge forward, but Wang Jiangguo held them back firmly. Inside, Wang Jiangguo was devastated. He desperately wanted to bury a fist in Smith's face, but looking at the engine, which had been blown to pieces, he could not squeeze out a single word of rebuttal. Their skills were simply inferior. Failure was failure. When someone mocks you to your face, you have no ground to stand on without results. Zhao Deming sat on the floor, clutching his head in agony, large tears streaming down his face. He asked, "Is it really impossible for us? Does it mean our fighter jets will always have to beg others for engines?" Just then, a young, clear voice rang out from the back of the crowd. "Who says we can't build it?" Everyone froze in shock. They turned their heads to look. They saw Chen Zheng dusting off his clothes, stepping boldly out from the crowd. Right now, he was just an ordinary technician at the plant, but those present felt that the young man's current aura was like a freshly sharpened steel blade. Chen ignored their stares. The system in his mind was operating at high speed, blue data panels flashing before his eyes. Target locked. Early experimental turbofan core engine. Fault scan complete. Root cause, high-pressure compressor, 3rd stage. Defect in blade aerodynamic profile design, leading to severe aerodynamic stall. Triggered surge and alternating stress overload, causing blade root fracture. Material status, titanium alloy strength meets standards. No metallurgical defects found. Seeing the precise conclusion from the system, Chen Zheng felt confident. He strode toward the test bench. He grabbed a fireproof asbestos cloth to protect his hand, and reached directly into the scorched debris, pulling out a fractured compressor blade. The edges of the blade were pitted from the explosion, and the fracture point was covered in torn metal jaggedness. Chen Zheng held the scorching piece of scrap metal, turned around and walked right up to Smith. With a loud clang, he slammed the broken blade onto the steel plate at Smith's feet. Chen questioned, "Buy from you, so you can hold us by the throat whenever you please." Chen Zheng pointed at the blade on the ground, his voice icy cold. He told Smith to open his eyes and take a good look. Chen said Smith kept claiming their materials were the issue. "But look at this fracture. This is absolutely not a break caused by material fatigue." Smith was startled. He stepped back a few paces, frowning as he looked at Chen Zheng. The translator hurried to convey the words. After Smith heard it, he asked disdainfully what a low-level worker could possibly know. Smith demanded if it was not a material problem, what else could it be? Chen Zheng let out a cold laugh. His gaze swept across the room as he declared loudly, "This is a severe surge caused by a defect in aerodynamic design. When the engine speed approaches 9,500 RPM, the airflow within the compressor passage undergoes severe boundary layer separation. The airflow chokes the passage, causing the compressor surge margin to instantly crash past the 8% red line. Massive alternating stress tore it apart. The blade root was snapped clean off. The room fell so silent you could hear a pin drop." Zhao Deming jerked his head up. He scrambled frantically toward the control console. He snatched a strip of data paper printed during the test run. His eyes widened in shock. He scanned down the ink lines, row by row. Zhao Deming muttered, 9,400 RPM. Severe fluctuations in compressor outlet pressure. 9,500 RPM. Flow rate dropping off a cliff. His voice trembled with sheer excitement. "It matches. Every bit of it matches. It really is a surge. It is not a material failure. The aerodynamic profile design is flawed." The airflow turbulence literally vibrated the blades until they snapped. As soon as those words were spoken, the whole room erupted. Wang Jianguo spun around abruptly. He locked his gaze onto Smith. He demanded, "Mr. Smith, weren't you just insisting repeatedly that the problem was our materials? Now, what do you have to say for yourself?" Smith's face turned a deep shade of crimson. He never could have imagined that a young worker from a remote mountain factory could actually see through the root cause of the failure at a single glance, even predicting the specific data points with perfect accuracy. But he remained as stubborn as a mule. Stiffening his neck, he shouted, "So what if you found the cause? Aerodynamic design is the core technology of aero-engines. You do not even have a decent large-scale high-speed wind tunnel, relying entirely on hand-drawn pencil sketches. How could you possibly design a perfect blade? You found the reason, but you will never ever be able to fix it. That is none of your concern." Chen Zheng interrupted him bluntly. He pointed his finger toward the main door. "No. Take your arrogance and get out of this control room. This is a restricted Dragon Nation military site. We do not welcome people who only come to mock us." Smith was trembling with rage. He pointed right at Chen Zheng's nose. "Fine. I will see how you handle this mess. When your project is completely scrapped, you will be the ones begging me for help." With that, Smith stormed out of the door in a huff. Silence returned to the control room. Kicking Smith out felt satisfying, but the harsh reality still lay before them. Zhao Deming looked at the data strip in his hand. He sighed with a bitter smile. "Chen, you gave him a good piece of your mind." But Smith was not wrong about one thing. Our aerodynamic design level is indeed lagging far behind theirs. To redesign the aerodynamic profile of the compressor blades, just calculating the data would take months. Then we would have to make wooden models and wait in line for wind tunnel testing. The deadline from above is less than a month away. There is simply no time left. Wang Jianguo looked like a deflated balloon. He crouched on the floor, chain-smoking heavily. "Even if we know the root of the disease, we do not even have a proper scalpel in our hands. How do we perform the surgery?" Just as everyone was falling into despair, Chen Zheng strode over to Wang Jianguo. He stood tall and resolute, decades of experience as an aero-engine master from his past life, combined with the newly activated system in his mind, were his ultimate source of confidence. "Director Wang, Chief Zhao." Chen's voice was not loud, but it rang out crystal clear in everyone's ears. "Redesign the blades. There is no need to wait in line for the wind tunnel. Hand over the design authority for the compressor blades to me. I will get it done." Wang Jianguo's hand, holding a cigarette, gave a sudden jerk. Ash scattered all over the floor. He looked at Chen Zheng in utter disbelief. "What kind of crazy talk is that, kid? Without the wind tunnel, how can you determine the airflow direction? This is a high-stakes military order. It is no joking matter." Chen straightened his back, his gaze firm and resolute. Before he could reply, an old man nearby wearing thick glasses slammed the table violently. "Nonsense. This is nothing but a total joke. The one slamming the table was the aerodynamics expert, Sun Daogong. He was so livid that his face was twitching. Pointing right at Chen Zheng's nose, he shouted, "You, a technician who has only been here a few years. What do you know about compressor aerodynamic design? That is millions of data points. Even if our entire institute worked day and night with slide rules, it would still take over 6 months." Sun Daogong grew angrier as he spoke, shaking his head repeatedly. "We do not even have a wind tunnel right now, and you say you can get it done. Are you going to blow the air with your own mouth? I can understand young people wanting to show off, but making a joke out of a key national project. Can you even shoulder that responsibility?" The other senior experts in the conference room sighed in agreement. "Indeed, this is way too arrogant. Without wind tunnel data, the blueprints are nothing but scrap paper. Smith and those foreigners just left, and now we are messing around like this. Aren't we just making ourselves a laughingstock?" Zhao Deming quickly stepped in to smooth things over. "Old son, do not lose your temper just yet." Young Chen witnessed the engine explosion. He is just anxious. Being anxious is no excuse to ignore science. Sun Daogong glared intensely at Chen Zheng, showing him no respect at all. "If you can finalize the aerodynamic shape today, without using a wind tunnel, I, old son, will eat this entire tea mug." Facing the harsh criticism, Chen did not get angry. Instead, he took a step forward. "Using the old methods would indeed take 6 months. But if we introduce 3D flow field matrix deduction, 1 night is enough." His tone was calm, as if he were stating the most ordinary fact. "What deduction?" Sun Daogong was stunned. Chen did not explain. He turned and walked straight to the large blackboard. He grabbed the eraser and quickly cleared the meeting notes. Then he picked up a piece of white chalk. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. A ping echoed in his mind. The system prompt sounded. "Matrix deduction module activated." In the blink of an eye, a glowing blue virtual space appeared in his mind. This was the system's built-in virtual wind tunnel. With a single thought, the model of the previously destroyed compressor blade instantly appeared in the center of the wind tunnel. Simulating intake airflow. Mach 0.8. Execute command. A gale roared within the virtual wind tunnel. Countless blue lines representing the airflow slammed violently against the straight blades. Next, piercing red lights flashed frantically within his mind. Chen Zheng saw it with absolute clarity. When the airflow hit the edges of the straight blades, severe boundary layer separation occurred instantly. It was like water slamming into a flat wall. Everything turned into chaos. The airflow formed massive vortices within the blade channels. This was the culprit causing the engine surge and the ultimate explosion. "I have found the root of the problem." Chen Zheng reached out directly into the virtual space. He grabbed one of those rigid virtual blades. "Since straight blades can't suppress the airflow, then I will just bend them." Chen Zheng applied force with both hands. With the assistance of the system's computing power, the once straight blade began to deform. He bent the blade root forward and swept the tip backward. In the blink of an eye, a uniquely shaped swept curve blade appeared in the wind tunnel. Retesting. The gale blew through once again. This time, a miracle happened. The once violent and chaotic airflow followed the curvature of the swept blade and glided over perfectly obediently. The red warning lights vanished completely. They were replaced by a green glow, signifying perfection. A line of large text popped up on the system panel. Aerodynamic layout optimization complete. Surge margin increased by 25%. Efficiency increased by 15%. Generating matrix derivation formulas and calculus models. Chen Zheng's eyes snapped open. He pressed the chalk in his hand directly against the blackboard. Tap, 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 a rapid-fire succession of chalk strikes echoed through the meeting room like small explosions. Chen's wrist flew across the surface. Without using a ruler or compass, he drew directly on the left side of the blackboard. A bizarrely shaped blade sketch. The blade looked like a twisted scimitar. The root protruded forward, the tip swept backward, and the entire body had a twist, like a piece of fried dough. When Master Sun saw the drawing, he was stunned at first. Then he laughed out of sheer frustration. "Chen Zheng," Master Sun asked Chen Zheng what on earth he was drawing. "Is that supposed to be a kitchen knife? Compressor blades must be straight." Master Sun said Chen Zheng had twisted it like a pretzel. With such high centrifugal force when it rotates, it would snap in half instantly. Master Sun called it nonsense. Pure, unadulterated nonsense. The other experts also shook their heads repeatedly. They felt Chen Zheng must have snapped under the pressure, that his mind was no longer stable. Chen ignored them completely. Having finished the sketch, he stepped to the center of the blackboard. The chalk in his hand began a wild dance. He was not writing simple arithmetic, but line after line of complex calculus, equations, and massive matrix formulas. Chen spoke as he wrote the Navier-Stokes. Single quote, equations expanded under a rotating coordinate system. He circled key data points with the chalk as he worked. Chalk dust fell like snow, covering his hair and face. He did not even blink. Chen Zheng said, by introducing the concept of spatial sweep. Single quote, we changed the radial pressure gradient within the blade passage. The chalk snapped. Chen Zheng tossed the half piece aside, grabbed a new one, and kept writing. Chen said, here, we use 3D partial differential equations. Single quote, to calculate the flow boundary of the boundary layer. Then, substitute them into this sixth-order matrix. More and more formulas filled the blackboard. Densely packed, they looked like a giant web. Master Sun, who had been sneering and mocking just moments ago, now found the cold smirk frozen on his face. He stood up straight, his eyes widening behind his thick reading glasses. Master Sun's voice trembled slightly as he asked if this was a calculation for a 3D flow field. Zhao Deming also leaned in, staring intently at the partial differential equations on the blackboard. Breathing heavily, he spoke up. Zhao Deming told Old Sun to look at Chen Zheng's matrix transformation. Chen had taken complex fluid dynamics problems and reduced them to linear algebra for a solution. Zhao Deming remarked that this logic was absolutely brilliant. The atmosphere in the meeting room shifted completely. The veteran experts who thought Chen was just messing around were all standing up now, craning their necks forward, terrified of missing a single symbol. Chen was writing at lightning speed. The system had imprinted the entire derivation process directly into his mind. Right now, he was nothing short of a human printing machine. In less than 10 minutes, the entire large blackboard was covered in calculus, formulas, and matrix derivations. Chen Zheng stepped aside, pulled over a second blackboard, and continued writing. Master Sun was shaking with excitement. He pointed out Chen Zheng's integral calculation for the sweep angle. He whipped out a pen and notebook, hunching over the table to copy everything down frantically. As Master Sun copied, he muttered that this was a godsend. This was the thinking of an absolute genius. Master Sun noted how he used the blade's curvature to squeeze the low-energy airflow from the root and tip toward the center. This would completely eliminate the root vortices. Master Sun wondered aloud why he had never thought of this himself. Though Wang Jiangguo could not decipher those cryptic math symbols, he knew how to read people. He watched Master Sun, the plant's most stubborn authority, behaving like an elementary student right now, sweating profusely while copying Chen Zheng's formulas. Wang was deeply shaken. Wang Jiangguo whispered to old Zhao, "Does what young Chen is writing actually work?" Zhao Deming swallowed hard, his voice trembling. Zhao Deming told the director, "If this mathematical model is derived correctly, it does not just work, it is a total game changer. Smith's country is still using 2D modeling, but young Chen has calculated the 3D flow field directly. Our aerodynamic design has just leapt forward by 20 years. Chen Zheng tapped the bottom right corner of the blackboard, marking the final decimal point with emphasis. He tossed the small remaining stub of chalk back into the box. He dusted off the chalk dust from his hands, turned around, and faced the audience. Across the two large blackboards, hundreds of calculus formulas and matrix derivations formed a perfect logical chain. From the moment the airflow entered the intake, every pressure change and every velocity vector was calculated with absolute clarity. There was no need for wind tunnel trial and error. Mathematics had already provided the only correct answer. Chen pointed at the blackboard and said calmly, "This is the aerodynamic model for the swept blade." Chen continued that with this, within 1 month, he guaranteed the production of new blades that would never stall. The meeting room fell into a dead silence. Master Sun stopped writing, staring blankly at the mathematical derivation on the board. His previous doubts and mockery were smashed to pieces by this blackboard full of hardcore formulas. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. After a long pause, Director Wang Jiangguo slammed his hand on his thigh, making his tea mug rattle. "Excellent," he shouted. He approved the blueprints. Wang Jiangguo declared they would follow Chen Zheng's plan and use this 3D flow field model. Master Sun suddenly grabbed Wang Jiangguo's arm, stamping his feet in urgency, saying, "Director, you can't be so hasty." Engineer Sun scoffed, saying that no matter how pretty the blueprints look, it is all just talk. A new blade must undergo wind tunnel testing once it is manufactured. But that beat-up low-speed wind tunnel in our plant, its maximum wind speed can't even reach Mach 0.5. It is impossible to test the actual surge limits during high-speed rotation. To use the National Supersonic Wind Tunnel in the Northwest, the waiting list is backed up until late next year. Smith and his foreigners want to see the results the day after tomorrow. There is simply no time. As soon as those words were spoken, the heated atmosphere in the meeting room vanished instantly. Lao Zhao let out a heavy sigh. He clutched his hair and crouched on the floor. Without wind tunnel test data, who would dare install this thing onto an engine? That is just waiting for the pilot and the plane to go down in flames together. Chen Zheng turned around and picked up the blackboard eraser. He wiped the board clean with a few forceful strokes. Erasing a formula, he quickly sketched 7 new diagrams. He said, "We will build our own wind tunnel." The room fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. Everyone stared at Chen Zheng as if he were a madman. Engineer Sun's face turned red with anger as he questioned, "Chen, do you even know what a supersonic wind tunnel is?" Engineer Sun said, "Those are national treasures built with massive funding. And you say we will just build one? With what? Are you going to blow the air yourself?" Chen ignored him. Using the chalk, he rapidly drew on the blackboard, sketching a pipe that was thick at both ends and narrow in the middle. Chen said, in the scrapyard of the mining bureau behind the mountain. Aren't there 3 decommissioned large industrial mining fans? Chen told Lao Jiao to bring men to haul them back and fix them up. They would connect them in parallel to serve as the power source. Chen Zheng tapped the narrowest part of the pipe heavily with the chalk. This is called a venturi tube. The principle is very simple. It is like when you pinch a hose while watering the garden. The water flow becomes sharper and faster. We will constrict the middle section of the iron piping. By utilizing the air pressure differential, we can force the wind speed into supersonic levels. Wang Jiangguo listened, stunned, and asked, will this actually work? Chen tossed the chalk aside and said, theoretically, it is absolutely feasible, as long as the piping can withstand the pressure. Reaching Mach 1.2 is no problem at all. Engineer Sun stood up abruptly, shouting, this is nonsense. You are literally gambling with lives. Engineer Sun leaned over the table, glaring at Chen Zheng. His voice was trembling. He said that with mining fans and this extreme compression pipe, how much air pressure will be inside? If the iron pipe fails and explodes, it becomes a massive super bomb. Everyone in the workshop will be killed. Who is going to take responsibility for that? Wang Jiangguo also hesitated. This was too serious. If an accident occurred, the entire plant would be finished. Without another word, Chen Zheng strode over to the desk, snatched a piece of official red header stationery, and scribbled a few lines with a fountain pen. He slammed it down directly in front of Wang Jiangguo. Chen said, this is a safety liability waiver, and also my life and death pledge. Chen stared into Wang Jiangguo's eyes and said word for word, I will draw the wind tunnel blueprints. I will weld the pipes myself. During the test, I will stand at the control console alone. If there is any explosion or casualty, I, Chen Zheng, take full responsibility. I am putting my life on the line for this. The factory won't bear a shred of blame. Wang Jiangguo looked at the signature on the paper. His eyes welled up. He gritted his teeth and stared at Chen Zheng for 10 full seconds. Wang Jiangguo shouted, nonsense. He, Wang Jiangguo, was not dead yet. It was not a young man's place to step up and take the heat for him. Wang Jiangguo grabbed the pen and signed his own name forcefully on the paper. He turned and roared at the room. What are you all standing around for? Get to work. Everyone in the plant, drop what you are doing. Fitters and welders, follow him to the back hill to move the blowers. Within 3 days, I want this makeshift wind tunnel assembled for him. 3 days later, workshop number 1. A rugged steel beast lay crouched in the center of the workshop. 3 massive mining blowers, each as tall as a man, stood in a row. Connected behind them was a giant pipe welded from thick steel plates. The middle of the pipeline narrowed significantly. Its exterior was bumpy, covered in weld scars. At the narrowest test section of the pipe, a block of 10-centimeter thick explosion-proof glass was installed. On the test bench behind the glass, a freshly polished silver-gray metal blade was bolted down tightly. That was the swept blade I crafted with my own hands. It was shaped like a curved scimitar, completely different from the old straight blades of the past. The workshop was packed with people. Even the old janitor had run over to peer through the window. Everyone held their breath, their palms sweating with anticipation, wearing noise-canceling earmuffs. I stood before the makeshift console, less than 2 meters from the pipe. I looked back at Wang Jiangguo and Lao Jiao, who were hiding behind the sandbag bunker. I gave them the OK signal. I muttered, gentlemen, start your engines, and slammed up the first heavy power switch. Blower number 1 started up. With a thunderous roar, the concrete dust on the workshop floor shuddered. Wild winds poured through the pipeline, releasing a low guttural moan. Lao Jiao stared at the tachometer and yelled at the top of his lungs. Wind speed at Mach 0.3. Airflow is stable. I placed my hand on the second switch and pulled it down hard. Blower number 2. Engage. Boom. The blower speed ramped up violently. The low moan transformed into a piercing shriek, like tens of thousands of whistles blowing at once. The pipeline casing began to vibrate slightly, emitting a jarring sound of metal friction. Lao Jiao was so nervous his voice cracked. He shouted, wind speed at Mach 0.7. We are approaching the surge threshold. With the previous blade designs, once the wind reached Mach 0.7, the airflow would separate on the surface, creating turbulence. The blade would shake like it was having a seizure, until it finally snapped. Everyone stared fixedly at the explosion-proof glass. Inside the glass, the red test ribbons attached to the swept blade surface were blown perfectly straight, hugging the curvature of the blade tightly. Not a hint of turbulence, not a single tremor. The blade was as steady as if it were a natural growth on stone. Sun poked his head out from behind the sandbags, his eyes nearly popping out of his head. No shaking, he exclaimed. It is not vibrating at all. I gripped the third main switch with both hands and took a deep breath. I roared at the top of my lungs. Blower number 3, full load. Let us see if we can blow this pipe apart. I threw my entire body weight onto the switch and pushed it all the way down. All three mining blowers erupted with a colossal boom. Airflow was forced into the contraction section of the venturi tube. The pressure surged to the absolute limit in an instant. Bang! Two thick rivets at a pipeline joint were blown clean off by the internal pressure. Sparks flew as they slammed into the workshop ceiling like bullets. The entire makeshift wind tunnel shook violently. It looked like it would blow up into a pile of scrap metal at any second. Lao Zhao closed his eyes in terror and shouted, "It is gone supersonic. Wind speed Mach 1.2. Pressure is off the charts." Wang Jianguo clenched his fists tightly. The wild supersonic airflow raged inside the pipes. It was powerful enough to tear apart anything in its path. But behind that thick layer of explosion-proof glass, that swept-back blade remained perfectly still. Its peculiar curvature acted like a sharp surgical scalpel, perfectly slicing and guiding the violent supersonic flow. The air glided obediently along the blade's surface, without creating any engine-stalling vortices. At this moment, the 3D flow field mathematical model became a solid physical reality. Chen Zheng stared at the data gauges. After confirming all parameters met the standards, he decisively pulled down the power lever. The fan speed gradually decreased. The ear-piercing scream faded away. Chen Zheng took off his earmuffs and turned around, looking at the stunned crowd behind the bunker. He broke into a wide grin. Chen Zheng said, "Everyone, the search problem is solved." The cheers almost brought the workshop roof down. Wang Jianguo rushed forward and pulled Chen Zheng into a hug. He pounded him on the back with excitement. Lao Zhao's eyes turned red with emotion. With trembling hands, he touched the intact swept blade. He muttered to himself, "We did it. It worked." Chen Zheng did not keep smiling. He pushed Wang Jianguo aside and tapped on the explosion-proof glass. Chen Zheng said, "Everyone, don't rush to celebrate just yet. The aerodynamic issue is solved, but that only proves our engine can breathe smoothly. Next up, we have to see if it can handle the heat. The thermal test is the real tough nut to crack." Lao Zhao's smile froze. Wang Jianguo also stood there, stunned. No matter how beautiful the theoretical data is, it must endure the trial by fire. 3 days later, at the thermal simulation test rig, an ear-piercing alarm echoed through the factory. Red lights flashed frantically. Lao Zhao yelled at the top of his lungs, "Shut it down. Cut the fuel, now." The operator yanked down the power lever. The roar of the test rig died down. Only black smoke continued to drift out from the exhaust pipe. The air was thick with the pungent smell of burnt metal. Chen Zheng, wearing thick asbestos gloves, walked to the test rig with long-handled iron tongs. He clamped out the turbine blade that had just been roasted. Everyone around him gasped in unison. The once straight and sturdy alloy blade now looked like a melting popsicle in the sun. The blade tip was completely twisted and deformed. The edges had turned into dripping metal lumps, just a charred flat mess. It did not look like a precision component anymore. Wang Jianguo took a closer look and slapped his thigh in frustration. Wang Jianguo said, "This won't do. Our aerodynamic design is too aggressive. The compression ratio of the intake air is too high, which means the gas temperature from the combustion chamber hits 1,300 degrees directly. Our current solid high-temperature alloy blades have a limit of barely 1,000 degrees. That is a gap of nearly 300 degrees. Even solid iron would turn to water at that point." The atmosphere in the meeting room was suffocating. Several senior technicians sat there, puffing away on their cigarettes. No one expected this. Just as they cleared the mountain of aerodynamics, they slammed headfirst into the brick wall of material melting points. "Engineer Chen, maybe we should take a step back." The gray-haired expert crushed his cigarette out in the ashtray. He tentatively suggested, "How about we reduce the air intake, limit the engine's RPM, and force the turbine inlet temperature back below 1,000 degrees. That way, the materials can survive, and the engine can actually run." Chen Zheng leaned on the table, staring at the old expert. His tone was rock solid, leaving no room for negotiation. "Lowering the temperature means sacrificing thrust. If the thrust-to-weight ratio does not hit 9.0, the fighters we build will take to the skies, only to become sitting ducks for the enemy. We would not even be able to outrun them to save our lives. Why bother with these advanced aerodynamic designs if we are just going to settle? We cannot back down on this. Not an inch." Lao Zhao scratched his scalp in frustration until it turned red. "If we do not back down, how do we fix it? At 1,300 degrees Celsius, unless we use hollow cooling blades, allowing cold air to pass through the interior to carry the heat away. It is like installing an air conditioner inside each blade, but we simply can't manufacture those things." Lao Zhao let out a heavy sigh. His eyes were filled with a sense of helplessness. "How do we even make a hollow blade? You would have to take a metal blade only a few millimeters thick and drill micro holes barely wider than a strand of hair. That requires a multi-axis laser drilling machine from abroad. Right now, They have a literal stranglehold on that technology. Forget about the machines. We have not even seen a photograph of one. What are we supposed to drill with? A sewing needle? Wang Jiangguo shook his head, his face full of bitterness. He is right, Chen. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear without the drilling equipment. These hollow blades are just a pipe dream. Chen did not respond. A sharp ping echoed in his mind. The system interface flashed open directly before his eyes. Detected, bottleneck in high-temperature material processing. Initiating, targeted deduction. Countless data streams, molecular diagrams, and technical parameters swirled wildly in Chen Zheng's mind. In just a few short seconds, a complete solution was generated. Deduction complete, investment precision casting with ceramic core technology. Chen Zheng snapped his eyes open and grabbed a piece of chalk. He turned and began tapping rapidly against the blackboard. He sketched a cross-section of a blade with an incredibly complex internal structure. Who said hollow blades have to be drilled? Chen turned to look at the room full of people. If we can't buy a drilling machine, then we won't drill. We will cast them as hollow structures from the very start. Everyone in the room was stunned. Lao Zhao stood up, pointing at the blackboard. His hand was trembling. Chen Zheng, what on earth are you? Are you sure about this? What kind of nonsense are you talking in broad daylight? With all those twisting, winding cooling channels inside the blade, how are you going to keep those spaces empty? When you pour molten steel into the mold, it will flood everything inside instantly. It will come out as a solid lump of metal. Chen Zheng tossed the chalk stub aside. He clapped the dust off his hands. We use ceramics, he said. Everyone stared at each other blankly. They were completely lost. Chen used his hands to gesture as he explained. First, we use a high-temperature resistant ceramic material to create the exact shape of the blade's internal cavity. This component is called a ceramic core. Think of it this way. It is like the wooden stick inside a popsicle. As he spoke, he wrote several chemical formulas on the blackboard. We fix this ceramic core inside the mold, then pour in the 1500-degree molten alloy steel. The molten steel will envelop the ceramic core. Once the steel cools and solidifies, the outer shape of the blade is now formed. Wang Jiangguo listened, completely dazed by the explanation. He could not help but interject, but is not the ceramic still stuck inside? Wang Jiangguo asked in confusion, doesn't that still leave us with a solid blade? Good question. Chen Zheng slapped the table with enthusiasm. Once the molten steel solidifies, we soak the entire blade in a strong alkaline solution. The alkali will completely dissolve and flush out the ceramic core inside, washing it perfectly clean. With the ceramic chemically removed inside the blade, won't we be left with a hollow cooling passage? The meeting room fell into a pin-drop silence. Everyone stared at Chen Zheng with wide eyes. This idea was absolutely insane. It directly overturned the casting common sense they had followed for decades. Old Zhao's mouth hung open for a long time. He stammered out, This approach is way too radical. But Chen Zheng, what kind of ceramic can possibly withstand the impact of 1500-degree molten steel? The moment the steel is poured in, that ceramic core would shatter instantly. And even if it does not shatter, the high temperature would warp the ceramic, ruining all the precision dimensions. Chen Zheng pulled over a stack of draft paper. He grabbed a fountain pen and began writing furiously. Use silica and alumina as the primary materials. Add a mineralizing agent, and mix the slurry according to my specific ratios. After high-temperature firing, it won't just withstand the molten steel's impact, it will also guarantee extremely high dimensional accuracy. Chen Zheng slapped the paper filled with formulas and process workflows down in front of Old Zhao. Old Zhao, take a look at this formula. As long as you follow this, never mind ordinary hollow blades. Even if we need high-spec single crystal blades, we can churn them out ourselves. Old Zhao's hands trembled as he picked up those pages. He had spent half his life in the casting industry, though he had never seen this specific process. The interlocking thermodynamic formulas and material ratios precise to the gram told him at a glance that this was the real deal. This was not just talk. It was a mature, top-secret technical process, ready for the production line. Old Zhao's eyes turned bloodshot with excitement. He clutched the paper tightly, fearing it might fly away. He wondered how Chen Zheng's brain was wired. If they pulled this off, their plant's precision casting technology would leap forward 20 years. Wang Jiangguo slammed his palm onto the table, making the teacups rattle. Let us do it. If we do not have foreign machinery, we will use our own grit and ingenuity to get it done. Chen Zheng, you tell us how to do it, and that is exactly how we will do it. After hearing the plan, the plant leadership approved it overnight. All plant resources were unconditionally diverted to Chen Zheng. Whatever he needed, he got a green light all the way. That night, the casting workshop was as bright as day. Bags of high-purity quartz sand and alumina were rushed in by trucks. Dozens of veteran workers reported for duty. Following Chen's blueprints, they worked through the night on molds and slurries. The furnace flames soared high, lighting the workshop in a crimson glow. The heat waves were so intense they drenched everyone in sweat. But no one complained of fatigue. They were all driven by a single purpose: The casting workshop felt like a giant pressure cooker. Workshop director Lu Depao slammed a cracked ceramic core heavily onto the iron table. His veins bulged in his neck from sheer frustration. Chen Zheng, I am not trying to hold everyone back here. Just look at all this scrap metal on the floor. Lu Dacheng pointed at the mountain of waste in the corner. He slapped his thigh in sheer frustration. 3 days of non-stop work, over 20 furnace runs burned through, and nearly every single one was a failure. This alumina powder and high-purity silica sand. They are precious imports bought with our limited foreign reserves. They are worth more than their weight in gold. Even the director's vouchers can't keep up with this kind of waste. Beside him, several veteran workers, faces covered in soot, hung their heads in silence. This task is just too difficult. To create hollow cooling channels inside a palm-sized turbine blade, you first have to fire a ceramic core as an internal mold. Then you pour the molten steel around it to form the shape. Finally, you have to dissolve the ceramic core from the inside. But these ceramic cores are far too brittle. They either crack in the furnace during firing, or they shatter instantly when the 1,000-degree molten steel hits them. Lao Jiao wiped his sweat and leaned in, whispering, Chen Zheng, maybe we should stick to the old Soviet method. Solid blades are good enough for now. This hollow single crystal technology, even the Westerners have not fully figured it out yet. I am afraid our crude furnace just can't handle it. Solid blades will just melt in the sky. We can't just make do with this. Chen stared at the scraps on the table. His gaze was as cold as ice. Suddenly a sharp ding echoed in his mind. The system notification rang out. Ceramic core formula for single crystal blades, simulation complete. Optimal ratio, silica powder 71.3%, alumina 15.5%. Plasticizer, 5%. Optimal firing temperature curve, generated. Maximum temperature resistance, 1,550 degrees Celsius. Chen Zheng ripped off his canvas jacket, which was stained with mud. Bare-chested, he strode toward the mixing tank. The crimson glow of the workshop fire illuminated his body. Sweat glistened on his skin. The formula ratio was off by a fraction. The furnace timing was 5 minutes too fast. Of course, it was going to crack. Chen grabbed a shovel and thrust it directly into the pile of materials. Dump it all. We are starting over. I will mix this batch myself. Lu Dacheng's eyes widened. He rushed over to stop him. Good heavens, my boy. This is not just playing with mud. You are just mixing blindly, without even using the electronic scales. If we waste another batch, I will be out of a job as workshop director. If anything goes wrong, I will take the fall. Chen did not even look up. The shovel in his hands was a blur. La Zhou, go to the warehouse and get 2 bags of zirconium oxide, and bring me the most precise hand scale we have. Lao Jiao gritted his teeth and turned to run. Do as Chen Zheng says. Let us do this. Chen took the small scale, the kind used for herbal medicine, and weighed the powders gram by gram. Silica powder, alumina, zirconium oxide. He poured them into the mixing barrel, exactly as the system dictated. Then he added the plasticizer. Still bare-chested, he used a large wooden pole to stir the barrel with all his might. The thick, gooey slurry made a heavy squelching sound. The muscles in both of Chen's arms were taut. Sweat dripped from his chin into the barrel. He did not even have time to wipe it away. Chen shouted, injection molding. Several workers scrambled to pour the slurry in. The metal mold pressed it into shape. Half an hour later, over a dozen ceramic cores, as complex as twisted dough, were carefully carried out into the furnace. La Zhou, keep your eyes on the air vent. Wait for my command. Chen Zheng grabbed a wet towel and draped it over his neck. He stared intensely at the mechanical thermometer needle on the furnace. This crude baking method has no computer-controlled temperature. It all relies on the human eye for the fire color and the needle. Ignition. Open the vent 1/3. Raise the temperature slowly. Stabilize at 400 degrees. The flames in the furnace suddenly surged high with a roar. Open the vent fully. Push it to 900 degrees. Hold it steady for 10 minutes. Chen's commanding was like leading a battle. Every instruction hit the system's temperature curve with pinpoint precision. Not a single second off. Lu Depao watched from the side, swallowing hard. His heart was in his throat. Close the vent. Keep the fire down. Final sprint to 1,500 degrees. The heat wave was so intense it stung the skin on their faces. Chen stood closest to the furnace door. His eyebrows were nearly scorched, but he did not retreat an inch. Time's up. Out of the furnace. The furnace door swung open with a boom. A blinding red light burst out. Lao Jiao, wearing thick asbestos gloves, used iron tongs to take the fired ceramic core, and placed it on refractory bricks to cool. The workshop was so quiet you could only hear the whirring of the fans. 10 minutes later, the dark red glow of the core faded, turning pure white. Lu Depao leaned in for a closer look, slapped his thigh hard, his voice cracking with excitement. No cracks. Not a single crack. The core surface is as smooth as high-grade porcelain. Lao Jiao rubbed his hands together in agitation. he exclaimed. My goodness. Chen Zheng, is your brain made of a computer? This formula is divine. Chen wiped away some soot, saying, don't celebrate too early. This is only the first step. Prepare for casting immediately. Molten steel temperature at 1530 degrees. Prepare the crystallizer. Here comes the main event. We must pour the 1000-degree alloy steel into the mold to encase this fragile ceramic core. A bit too hot and the core melts. A bit too cool and the steel won't flow, causing air bubbles in the blade. The most critical part is to make the blade withstand ultra-high temperatures. The internal metal atoms must be aligned in a single direction. In other words, a single crystal, without an imported directional solidification furnace. Chen Zheng used a makeshift method. He added a water-cooled copper plate at the mold base as a crystallizer. Chen shouted to open the furnace bottom. Pour the steel. The glowing red alloy steel was like a fire dragon, pouring through the funnel into the mold. With a loud sizzle, white smoke billowed up. Chen Zheng shouted at the top of his lungs. Slow down. Pull the crystallizer. 1 millimeter down per minute. Lao Zhao turned the handle to control the mold's slow descent. The molten steel touching the water-cooled copper plate solidified first, forming a crystal seed. As the mold pulled downward, the seed grew upward through the mold like a sapling. It forcibly pulled the chaotic metal atoms into a single perfect piece of single crystal. Steel pouring complete. The workshop was as hot as an oven. Chen Zheng slumped onto a wooden crate, gasping for air. He said, it is done. Let us wait for it to cool down. For 4 whole hours, not a single soul left the workshop. Once the mold had cooled completely, the workers used hammers to smash away the outer shell, revealing a pitch-black metallic lump. Chen Zheng called for the alkaline bath. Chen Zheng stood up and had them throw that metallic lump into a large, high-pressure vat filled with boiling sodium hydroxide. It bubbled and boiled for 3 hours. The strong alkaline solution completely dissolved the ceramic core inside the metal. Chen shouted, bring it out. They rinsed it with a high-pressure water gun. After the sound of rushing water faded, Lao Zhao held the object with both hands and carefully placed it on the workbench. Lu Depao and a dozen veteran workers all crowded around, their eyes wide with anticipation. It was an incredibly beautiful turbine blade. Its surface shimmered with a silvery alloyed light, without a single crack or a single air hole. The single crystal structure made it look like a metallic gemstone. Chen Zheng stepped forward, picked up a high-intensity flashlight, and pressed it against the blade. He clicked the switch over the air intake at the base. A beam of intense light pierced directly through the interior of the blade, emerging from the surface through film cooling holes that were as thin as a strand of hair. The light was dazzlingly bright. The incredibly complex cooling channels were perfectly revealed. Everyone held their breath. Chen gave the word, assemble the engine. The workshop immediately buzzed with activity. A dozen wrenches were put to work at once. Lao Zhao led several master craftsmen, delicately handling those silver gleaming, single crystal hollow cooling blades. They slotted them into the grooves of the turbine disc. With a crisp click, they fit perfectly without a single gap. Then came the second blade and the third. Once the full circle of new blades was installed, the entire turbine disc looked like a massive gear bristling with metallic fangs. Lu Depao shouted at the top of his lungs to start the crane. The overhead crane on the ceiling roared to life. Thick steel cables hooked onto the heavy rotor, lifting it bit by bit, slowly sliding it into the core casing of the engine. 3 hours later, a newly reassembled, improved turbofan engine was bolted securely to the test stand by a heavy steel frame. The machine looked rugged on the outside, even showing some oil stains and scratches, but its heart had been replaced with the single crystal cooling blades that Chen had developed personally. The test cell was a heavy reinforced concrete bunker. The walls were a full meter thick, embedded with explosion-proof glass. Outside, it was connected to massive intake and exhaust pipes. Chen Zheng pushed open the heavy iron door and walked into the control room. The room was already packed. The director, Lao Zhao, Lu Depao, and a dozen core technicians were all staring intently at the steel beast on the stand outside. Lao Zhao swallowed hard. With a dry throat, he asked, Engineer Chen, are we really going for 150 hours? That is the ultimate bench test. A 150-hour endurance test was a first in the entire history of this plant. This was not just letting the engine spin idly. This was meant to simulate a fighter jet in its most extreme flight conditions, pushing from idle directly to full load, then engaging the afterburner, then suddenly cutting the throttle, repeating this grueling cycle, non-stop for 6 days and 6 nights. The peak temperatures could reach up to 1,400 or 1,500 degrees. Rotational speed is over 10,000 RPM. If you put ordinary steel in there, it would melt into molten iron in seconds. If even the slightest thing goes wrong, and a blade snaps, the entire engine will blow up like a bomb on the spot. It could even flip the entire test bed. Chen Zheng walked to the console and pulled out a chair to sit. He said, today, we are going to squeeze every last drop of potential out of this machine. Everyone, to your stations. If we do not hit 150 hours, how are we going to shut those people's mouths outside? Chen Zheng walked to the console and pulled out a chair to sit. He said, today, we are going to squeeze every last drop of potential out of this machine. Everyone, to your stations. All personnel, return to your posts immediately. Someone shouted that the fuel pump was on. Pressure is normal. Someone shouted to engage the starter. Chen stared at the engine through the blast-proof glass. He slammed the green ignition button and yelled, ignition. The starter let out a piercing screech, driving the large fan blades to start spinning. The speed grew faster and faster. Then, high-pressure aviation kerosene was sprayed into the combustion chamber. With a roar like thunder, a massive blast erupted in the test bay. Blue flames surged violently from the exhaust nozzle. They were at least 2 to 3 meters long. The entire control room floor vibrated instantly. The lids of the T-mugs on the desks rattled incessantly. Chen Zheng shouted, push the throttle. Go straight to full load. The operator gritted his teeth and pushed the throttle lever all the way to the end. The flames at the tail nozzle instantly changed from blue to a blinding bright orange. The fire flared up to 5 or 6 meters. The engine's roar turned into a sky-tearing howl. The vibration made everyone's ears ring. Someone shouted, rotational speed 100%. Someone shouted, thrust has reached peak design value. Lao Zhao stared fixedly at the instrument panel. His eyes were nearly popping out of his head. He reported, turbine inlet temperature 1420 degrees. This temperature has long exceeded the melting point of high-temperature alloys. If these were the old solid blades, they would have gone soft as noodles and been flung apart by now. But now, the engine continues to roar steadily. Chen Zheng shouted to check the cooling data. The operator's voice was trembling with excitement, reporting that the film cooling holes are working normally. Cool air coverage is over 95%. The blade surface temperature is only 900 degrees, completely within the safety margin. Single crystal hollow blades. Success. A burst of cheering erupted in the control room. The director slapped his thigh and shouted, excellent. Lu Dacheng was grinning from ear to ear. Chen Zheng kept a cold face and threw a bucket of cold water on the mood. He said, do not celebrate too early. It has not even been an hour yet. It must be 150 hours. If it is 1 minute short, it does not count. Set up the shifts. Keep your eyes glued to those instruments. Even if a fly wanders in, I want it recorded. The long, grueling test from hell has begun. Day 1. Passed smoothly. Day 2. The engine is still roaring. Day 3, Day 4. The control room is filled with the thick smell of smoke and sweat. Empty instant noodle cups are piled in the corner. No one went home. When exhausted, they just spread newspaper on the concrete floor for a nap. When they wake up, they wash their faces with cold water. Then they go back to staring at the instrument panel. Everyone's eyes are bloodshot from staying up, yet their spirits remain incredibly high. Hour 130, 3:00 a.m. A bone-chilling wind suddenly started howling outside. The temperature plummeted. The air grew extremely cold. A sudden cold snap swept through the entire plant. Inside the control room, Lao Zhao was leaning back in his chair, dozing off. Chen Zheng held a cup of strong tea. He frowned, staring at the dazzling exhaust flame outside the glass. Everything seemed normal. Suddenly, the roar of the engine changed. The original smooth vroom was suddenly punctuated by a heavy, thumping sound. It was like someone was being strangled, gasping for air. Then, the entire floor of the control room shook violently. With a loud clang, the tea mug in Chen Zheng's hand was knocked straight to the floor. Tea splashed everywhere. Lao Zhao jerked awake. He bolted upright from his chair. He shouted, what is happening? The alarm lights on the console flashed instantly. Red light bathed the entire room in a crimson glow. The piercing beeping of the alarm wailed incessantly. The operator was sweating profusely in panic. Both hands were frantically tapping on the console. He yelled, RPM is dropping. 90%, 85%. Intake pressure is plummeting. The air intake is blocked. Lu Depao rushed to the glass and stared outside. His face turned pale instantly. He cursed, what the hell? Single quote, it is icing up. Chen Zheng strode over in one step. He stared intently at the front of the test rig. The plummeting temperature, combined with high humidity, the test rig was frantically sucking in cold air. On the protective mesh of the air intake, a thick layer of white ice had formed in an instant. The ice layer grew thicker and thicker. It blocked more than half of the air intake. The engine could not breathe in enough air. The fuel-air ratio in the combustion chamber was thrown into chaos. Boom! The engine began to vibrate violently. The flames at the exhaust nozzle flickered erratically. It even started spitting out black smoke. Lao Zhao was stomping his feet in desperation. His voice went hoarse. He yelled, surge! The engine is surging! Shut it down now! The compressor blades are going to snap. The whole machine will blow up. According to regulations, when encountering severe intake icing and surging, the fuel must be cut immediately for an emergency shutdown. The operator's face was full of terror. His hand already reached for the red emergency stop button. If this button is pressed, the machine might be saved, but the 150 hours of continuous testing would be completely terminated. All that hard work for nothing. Moreover, a sudden fuel cut and temperature drop could cause the new blades, currently in an ultra-hot state, to crack due to the extreme thermal shock. The entire experiment would be a total failure. Chen Zheng roared, "Don't touch it." He slapped the operator's hand away. The operator recoiled in fear. He cried out, "Engineer Chen, it is going to explode." Chen Zheng said firmly, "It won't explode. I have got this." Chen squeezed directly into the control station. Both hands tightly gripped the manual fuel control lever. Chen Zheng's eyes were bloodshot. He looked like an enraged lion. He shouted, "Lao Jiao, report the RPM and temperature." Depao, keep your eyes glued to the ice layer in the air intake. The director's legs turned to jelly from sheer terror. "Ask Engineer Chen, what are you doing?" Chen Zheng gritted his teeth. The muscles in both his arms were taut. He muttered, forced mapping to icing. He did not cut the fuel supply. Instead, with a forceful flick of his wrist, he pushed the throttle lever forward inch by inch. He has lost his mind. The engine is already at its breaking point, and he is still increasing the fuel. Massive amounts of aviation kerosene sprayed into the combustion chamber. Due to the lack of oxygen, it could not burn completely. The engine let out a low, agonizing roar. It shook so violently that even the thick bolts on the test bed began to let out an ear-piercing screech. Lao Jiao watched the instrument panel and shouted, "RPM is dropping to 60%. The temperature is rising. Turbine inlet temperature is 1480 degrees, 1500 degrees. His heart was about to jump out of his chest. This is the absolute limit for single crystal blades. Chen Zheng stared fixedly ahead and shouted, "Hold on for me." His mind was frantically calculating the fuel flow and the critical point of the air intake volume. He needed to, just a second before the engine flamed out, create an extremely violent high-temperature heat wave, utilizing the reverse mapping airflow at the edge of the intake to force the ice layer to melt away. This is like walking a tightrope, off by even 0.1 seconds, and the engine would suffer an instant, catastrophic failure. Lao Jiao roared, 1530 degrees. Engineer Chen, critical limit reached. Chen Zheng shouted, "Now." Chen Zheng yanked back with both hands. He instantly pulled the throttle back halfway. Then, within a fraction of a second, he slammed it forward to the floor again. An earth-shattering boom erupted, deafening everyone. A violent explosion of combustion occurred inside the engine. A visible circular heat wave surged out along the edges of the air intake. Outside the explosion-proof glass, the thick ice that had been stubbornly blocking the intake shattered instantly under the impact of the ultra-high temperature wave. Before the large chunks of ice crystals could even fall, they were sucked back into the engine by the terrifying suction. But the moment they passed through the compressor, the high temperature vaporized them directly into white steam. The tail nozzle spat out a massive cloud of mixed white mist and black smoke. Then, the bright orange afterburner pierced the air again like a sharp sword. A steady plume of fire shot out 5 or 6 meters long. The frantic vibration stopped. The ear-piercing sputtering noise vanished. Inside the test cell, only the steady, powerful roar of the engine remained. The operator looked at the needles quickly normalizing and shouted, "RPM is back. 80%, 90%. Full load operation." In his excitement, he slapped his thigh hard. Lao Jiao shouted, "Intake pressure is back to normal. Turbine inlet temperature dropped back to 1400 degrees. Alarm cleared." He slumped to the floor. He was gasping for air. His shirt was completely soaked with cold sweat. Lu the cannon wiped the sweat from his forehead. The way he looked at Chen Zheng was as if he were looking at a monster. That manual fine-tuning of fuel and the force to icing was simply divine. A masterclass in operation. That level of control over timing and fuel volume is simply superhuman. No ordinary person could do that. Chen Zheng slowly released his grip on the throttle lever. His palms were covered in sweat. Inside the test cell, the steady roar of the engine made everyone's ears ring. The countdown on the wall ticked away, second by second. 149 hours 59 minutes. In the control room, no one dared to breathe a word. Every eye was glued to the glowing red digits. Lao Jiao gripped the edge of the table with a death grip. His knuckles had turned stark white. Lu Depao did not even dare to blink. He was terrified the machine would blow up the second he shut his eyes. Chen Zheng stood before the console, hands tucked in his pockets. His face was a mask of absolute calm. Lu Depao strained his voice, shouting out the final 10 seconds. His voice was trembling uncontrollably. The entire room joined in the countdown, 10, 9, 8. By the end, the counting had turned into raw screams. Chen Zheng shouted, 3, 2, 1, time's up. In one swift motion, he slammed the throttle lever all the way back. Fuel supply cut. The mechanical roar that had thundered for 150 hours began to fade. The orange flames dancing in the tail nozzle died out. The turbine blade spun slower and slower. Finally, with one last low metallic groan, it came to a complete standstill. The room fell into a terrifying silence. 3 full seconds passed. Then, the control room erupted in a cheer loud enough to take the roof off. Lao Zhao choked out, "We did it, Lao. Good heavens, I am truly convinced. We actually pulled through." He finished speaking and collapsed onto the floor. Covering his face, he began to sob uncontrollably. Lu Depao was jumping for joy like a madman. He grabbed whoever was next to him, hugging and slapping them on the back. His hat fell and got trampled, but he could not care less. A 150-hour endurance test at the limit. They even survived that life-threatening moment when the air intake iced up. This modified engine that no one believed in had fought its way through by sheer force of will. A young technician suddenly stood up and shouted, "Don't just celebrate. Look at the data, quick. The results are all in." He clutched the freshly printed datasheet in his hand. He was shaking so hard from excitement. Chen Zheng walked over. He snatched the datasheet. In an instant, the whole crowd swarmed around him. Their eyes were fixed like hawks on that single piece of paper. Lu Depao squinted at the numbers and blurted, "Maximum thrust. Holy mother of 9.8 tons. His eyeballs nearly popped out of his head. Lao Zhao scrambled up from the floor. He leaned in to take a look. His voice cracked with emotion. He asked, 9.8 tons. The original design target was only 8.5 tons. The thrust had jumped by over a whole ton. Someone urgently asked, "What about the fuel consumption rate?" The technician shouted out the figures. Fuel consumption is down by 15%. Turbine inlet temperature stayed stable at 1,400 degrees throughout. Every single indicator is within normal range. Not a single surge occurred. His face was flushed a deep, excited red. The entire room exploded into chaos once again. What did this data mean? It meant this piece of junk was not just repaired. It had been catapulted to a world-class level. It could go toe-to-toe with the most advanced foreign tech of its time. An ear-piercing strange cry came from the back. "Impossible." Peter, the foreign expert, pushed through the crowd. His face was dark as he squeezed to the front. He snatched the sheet right out of Chen Zheng's hands. He stared intently at the numbers. His face turned as pale as a ghost. Peter pointed a finger right at Chen Zheng's nose and roared, "Your testing equipment must be broken." Peter insisted that the data was either faked or the gear was faulty. At 1,400 degrees high temperature, plus that massive block of ice being sucked in, the engine's internals should be completely destroyed. This data defies the laws of science. Lu Dapao's face turned red with fury. He rolled up his sleeves, ready to give the man a piece of his mind. Chen Zheng reached out to stop him. He stared coldly at Peter. Chen Zheng let out a cold laugh and said, "You do not believe it, do you? Fine, Dapao. Take your men and strip the engine. Focus on inspecting the high-pressure turbine section. Let him open his eyes wide and take a good look, whether it is actually ruined or not." Lu Depao roared back, "You got it. Brothers, grab your gear." He led several burly fitters and charged into the test cell. The engine had just stopped. The outer casing was still scalding hot. Lu Depao and his men put on thick asbestos gloves. Armed with large wrenches, they surrounded the machine and began dismantling it. The thick mounting bolts were unscrewed one by one and tossed to the floor. Clang, 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 the metal echoed. Peter stood right at the front, clutching a flashlight. His neck was stretched out as far as it could go. He was absolutely certain in his heart, once the cover was lifted, the inside would be nothing but a pile of melted scrap metal. Temperatures of 1,400 degrees, plus thermal expansion and contraction. Even their country's most advanced machines could not withstand that. Lu Depao waved his hand, signaling for the hoist to start. The overhead crane in the workshop roared to life. The hooks engaged the casing and slowly pulled it upward. A blast of scorching heat rushed toward them, carrying the heavy scent of engine oil and burnt metal. The heavy machine cover was completely removed, revealing the high-pressure turbine section, the core of the engine. Peter immediately switched on his flashlight. The beam of light hit the turbine blades directly. His eyes widened. He was waiting to find melted metal slag. The moment the light illuminated the blades, Peter froze completely. No melting, no fractures. A full ring of blue-gray turbine blades were lined up perfectly in place, though the surface bore traces of high-temperature scorching. The overall structure was completely intact. He could not find even a single hairline crack. The hand Peter used to hold the flashlight began to tremble. He muttered, "How is this possible?" Lao Zhao leaned in with a magnifying glass to inspect them meticulously. His voice was shaking with excitement. Lao Zhao said, "The film cooling holes are all clear. Not a single one is blocked. The edges of the blades have not suffered any heat damage at all." Peter suddenly shoved Lao Zhao aside. He practically sprawled himself over the machine, staring intensely at the dense array of small holes on the blade surface. The flashlight beam shone into the holes, revealing the complex hollow structure inside. Peter gasped. Single crystal hollow. It really is a single crystal hollow structure. Peter turned to look at Chen Zheng, as if he were looking at a monster. "You do not even have 5-axis CNC machine tools. How could you possibly manufacture single crystal blades with film cooling? This kind of ceramic core technology. Even our company is still in the experimental stage." Chen Zheng brushed the dust off his hands. He walked up to Peter. Pointing at that row of perfect blades, Chen said, "Just because you can't do it does not mean we can't." Chen Zheng said, "This is what we handcrafted bit by bit, using our own own indigenous methods. Our system simulated curved aerodynamic profile, combined with ceramic core casting, perfectly solved the issue of high-temperature melting. Peter could not muster a single word for a long time. His face flushed red and then turned pale. The foreign technology he was most proud of was today, in this dilapidated workshop, utterly humbled and dragged through the mud by this young man. The test was a massive success. Everyone was busy tidying up the site, preparing for the report. Chen Zheng walked out of the sweltering test cell. He stepped into the corridor to catch his breath. He just lit a cigarette. Footsteps approached from behind. Peter hurried over with a fawning smile on his face. His attitude was a complete 180 from before. Peter stopped Chen Zheng. He glanced around cautiously. Lowering his voice, he addressed Chen. "Wait a moment." Chen exhaled a puff of smoke. He remained silent. He just looked at him coldly. Peter gave a thumbs up. His tone was filled with temptation. He said to Chen, "You are a true genius." Peter continued, staying in this dilapidated plant, using such obsolete equipment, and earning a meager salary of a few dozen bucks a month. It is a crying shame for a talent like yours. Peter pulled a gold-embossed business card from his pocket. He handed it over with both hands. Peter's eyes gleamed. He grew more excited as he spoke. "Come to our company. If you are willing to jump ship, I can apply to headquarters to offer you an annual salary of $500,000. Not just the money, but also a large villa and a luxury car, as long as you nod your head. Green cards for your whole family will be processed immediately. You can start living the best life in the world right away." $500,000. In this day and age, it was an unimaginable fortune for an ordinary person. Peter was confident. In this remote mountain valley, absolutely no one could refuse such a massive sum. Chen Zheng looked down at the card. He did not even reach out to take it. He threw his cigarette butt on the ground. He crushed it ruthlessly with the tip of his shoe. Chen raised his head. His gaze was as cold as a blade. "Take your filthy money and get lost." Peter was stunned. He looked completely bewildered. He asked why. "Don't you want to live the good life? Your country can't give you any of this." Chen Zheng stared at Peter. He threw each word back in his face. "The backbone of a Dragon Nation man is not for sale." Hearing Chen's words, Peter's face turned pale with shock and anger. He could not fathom how $500,000 and green cards failed to move a poor kid who could not even afford a decent coat. Gnashing his teeth, he stuffed the gold-embossed card back into his pocket. He turned around, hopped into his black Santana, and sped off. Chen brushed the dust off his hands, about to return to the workshop. Director Wang Jiangguo came running over in a hurry. He was panting heavily, clutching a telegram tightly. He grabbed Chen's arm and shoved the paper toward him. "Chen, quick. The military has sent an urgent telegram." Chen looked down, his eyebrows arching. It was a challenge for a flight test. The military required the new turbofan engine, just developed by the plant, to be sent immediately to the Northwest Plateau for flight tests. The base was to conduct extreme high-altitude testing. Several workshop supervisors crowded around to take a look. Their expressions changed instantly. Master Liu, a senior technician, slapped his thigh in anxiety. "This won't work," he exclaimed. "The air at 4,000 or 5,000 meters in the northwest is too thin. If the air intake drops, but the fuel injection remains the same, the engine will flame out and be ruined. It is guaranteed to suffer an in-flight flameout." Another supervisor chimed in. "Indeed, this is too rushed. It is like asking for the impossible. The engine works fine on the planes, but taking it to the plateau is a whole different ballgame. Major foreign manufacturers take 2 or 3 years just to calibrate plateau data, and we are going straight for the sky." Wang Jiangguo wipes away his sweat. He says the military is reporting massive pressure at the border. The new fighters can't wait. If we do not pass this hurdle, the whole project is going down the drain. Chen Zheng folds the telegram, stuffs it in his pocket, and sneers. He asks, "What the hell are we afraid of? It is just thin air, damn it." He plans to solve it by adding an automatic fuel regulating valve. Engineer Liu is stunned. He asks, "Add a valve? You make it sound so easy. That would require the most advanced electronic control systems. We can't even manufacture our own microchips. What are we going to control it with?" Chen Zheng looks toward the workshop. "Who said we have to use electronics? Pure mechanics can get the job done just as well. Old Wang, go get Master Wang, the 8th grade fitter. No one sleeps tonight." Back in the office, Chen Zheng locks the door. A system prompt dings in his mind. Detecting current mission, extreme plateau test flight. Optimal solution retrieved, mechanical. Plateau fuel air compensation valve blueprints. A flood of complex data and 3D structural diagrams rush into his brain. Chen Zheng grabs a pencil and pulls over a large sheet of plain paper. He hunches over the desk and begins to draw. Simply put, this thing is a mechanical device that automatically adjusts the throttle, based on changes in air pressure. When external air pressure is low, the internal springs and diaphragms automatically contract to close the throttle, ensuring the fuel-to-air ratio is always perfect. No electronic components, relying entirely on precision mechanical coordination. In the 1980s, this was an absolute stroke of genius. In less than 2 hours, 5 or 6 sheets are filled with dimensions and tolerances. He slaps the blueprints onto the iron table in the workshop. Master Wang stares through his reading glasses for a long time, gasping in shock. Master Wang says, "Engineer Chen, these blueprints are masterful, but these tolerance requirements are brutal." Master Wang points at the dimensions of a valve core. He says the margin of error cannot exceed 1/10 of a human hair. Our factory's old lathes have shaky cutting heads. We can't possibly cut edges this smooth. Without a word, Chen Zheng strips off his jacket. He strides over to the oldest lathe. Chen pulls the lever, and the machine starts rumbling to life. He says, "If the head shakes, we compensate by hand. Master Wang, you watch the scale. I will handle the manual grinding." Seeing this, Master Wang gets fired up too. He rushes over and fixes his eyes intensely on the vernier caliper. In the workshop, sparks fly and the pungent smell of engine oil fills the air. Chen Zheng grips the tool holder with both hands. His eyes are locked onto the high-speed rotating metal. His hands are as steady as if they were welded to the machine. Every cut is executed with perfect precision. All night long, the entire workshop works without rest, cutting, grinding, assembling. As dawn breaks, a palm-sized, gleaming silver, precision metal valve sits on the table. Chen Zheng wipes the oil off his face and waves his hand. Install it. Pack it up. We are heading to the Great Northwest. 3 days later, at the Great Northwest Plateau Test Flight Base, fierce winds whip ice pellets against their faces, causing stinging pain. At 4,500 meters above sea level, even standing still leaves you breathless. On the tarmac stands a silver-gray demonstrator aircraft, equipped with the new engine from Chen Zheng's factory. The test pilot, Lao Zhao, wearing heavy high-G gear, gives Chen Zheng a big thumbs up. He climbs the ladder into the cockpit. The command tower gives the order. The engine ignites and roars to life. The engine tailpipe erupts with blue fire. A massive roar shakes the ground, sending snowflakes swirling toward the sky. The fighter jet taxis down the runway and suddenly pulls up, charging straight into the clouds. On the radar screen, the blip climbs higher and higher. 5,000 meters. 6,000. 7,000 meters. Everything is going smoothly at the start. Everyone in the ground control center breathes a sigh of relief. Engineer Liu wipes his sweat and smiles, saying the compensation valve seems to be working. The RPM is very stable, but no sooner had he spoken than ear-piercing static erupts from the intercom. Lao Zhao reports to the tower, "They have hit a powerful cold front. The temperature has plummeted to -40 degrees. Lao Zhao's voice is noticeably tense. Immediately, red lights flash wildly across the control center's instrument panels. Alarms blare in a chaotic symphony. Lao Zhao shouts, "Thrust is dropping, I am losing power." Engine RPM drops from 9,000 to 6,000 and is still falling. Engineer Liu's face turns pale with fright. He lunges toward the panel, his voice trembling. "This is bad. The cold air hit too fast. The air density has changed. The compensation valve diaphragm is frozen stiff and stuck. The fuel flow can't be throttled down. The engine is about to flame out." The base commander grabs the microphone. He bellows, "Prepare for mid-air engine failure." Lao Zhao, "Prepare to eject at any moment." Chen Zheng shoves the commander aside and snatches the microphone. He holds the transmit button and roars, "Don't eject." Chen Zheng says to Lao Zhao, "Listen to me, don't cut the throttle. Push the stick all the way forward and dive." The entire room falls dead silent. The commander's eyes nearly pop out of his head. The commander grabs Chen Zheng by the collar. "Are you insane?" Single quote, "The engine has no thrust, and you want him to dive. That jet will turn into a pancake on the ground." Chen Zheng flings the commander's hand off, staring fixedly at the radar screen. He says, "The air pressure is not enough to open the valve. We must use the dive speed to force cold air into the intake. Use the airflow's impact to blast that stuck valve open." This is a literal gamble with his life. 2 seconds of silence hang in the intercom. Lao Zhao grits his teeth and roars, "Fine, I will trust you this once." High above, the fighter jet, stripped of thrust, begins to plummet. Lao Zhao slams the control stick forward. The nose drops, and the jet falls like a heavy iron weight toward the snow-capped mountains. The altimeter digits spin frantically. 6,000. 5,000. 4,000 meters. Everyone on the ground has their heart in their throat. A few faint-hearted technicians close their eyes, unable to look at the radar. The jet's descent gets faster and faster. Fierce winds rush through the intake, flooding into the engine. 3,500 meters. When the jet is less than 1,000 meters from the snowy peaks, the air pressure in the intake finally hits the critical point. A sharp clack rings out. The frozen mechanical compensation valve is forced open by the violent rush of air. The valve resets. The fuel supply drops instantly to the correct level. The fuel-air ratio recovers to a perfect state in an instant. Boom! An earth-shattering roar erupts through the intercom. A 10-meter tongue of blue and red flame jets from the engine tail. The thrust gauge needle slams straight to the maximum. Lao Zhao's excited roar explodes. Through the radio, thrust is back at full power. He pulls back on the stick with all his might. The fighter jet, mere hundreds of meters from the mountain peak, levels out through sheer force, kicking up a massive cloud of snow and mist. A titanic roar echoes across the snowy plains. The jet punches through the cloud layer. They just won the first round of the high-altitude test flight. Before the people in the tower can even cheer, Lao Zhao's booming voice comes through the intercom again. Lao Zhao says to Engineer Chen, "This engine is incredible. The throttle response is more than twice as fast as before. Since the weather is good, why do not we just test the high alpha maneuvers too?" As soon as he says this, the hearts of everyone in the tower, which had just relaxed, jump back into their throats. Engineer Lao Li is so terrified, he waves his hands frantically. He grabs the mic and yells, "Lao Zhao, do not you dare mess around. This is a plateau at 4,000 meters altitude. The air is extremely thin. Attempting high alpha maneuvers. Once the intake loses airflow, the engine will flame out immediately." Lao Zhao is fired up in the cockpit. He says, "What is there to fear? The new engine Engineer Chen built has incredible thrust. If I do not push it to the limit, this flight would be a total waste of time." Everyone turns their gaze toward Chen Zheng. Chen Zheng stares intently at the radar data. Total silence. The new single crystal blades and mechanical compensation valves are holding up perfectly. Now is indeed the best time to test the engine's limits. If we do not push this engine to the edge now, our pilots will pay for it with their lives on the battlefield. He grabs the intercom and speaks directly. "La Zhou, watch your altitude and airflow. You are cleared for the high angle of attack test. Do not exceed 35 degrees. Lao Zhao acknowledges, "Copy that, just watch me." High in the sky, the fighter jet pulls up sharply. The nose points high, charging toward the heavens. 35 degrees. The jet is flying almost vertically now. The massive fuselage tears through the air with brute force, leaving two long white vapor trails behind the wingtips. But the moment the angle breaks past 35 degrees, a powerful crosswind slams into it. The airframe shudders violently. The angle is blown past 40 degrees in an instant. Bang bang bang. Muffled explosions echo through the tower speakers. Immediately after, the thrust gauge bottoms out. Lao Li shouts, "Damn it, the engine is surging." His face turns pale. The angle of attack is too high. The intake is being shielded by the fuselage. The engine can't breathe. Flame is backfiring from the combustion chamber. Thrust has dropped to zero. Powerless, the fighter jet turns into a multi-ton hunk of iron. On the radar screen, the blip representing the jet starts spinning wildly. The altitude digits are plummeting. A technician collapses to the floor in terror. His voice is trembling. It is a flat spin. The falling leaf maneuver. Every test pilot's worst nightmare. The plane has completely lost lift. It is spiraling down toward the earth. Under this centrifugal force, the pilot's brain will be drained of blood, causing a blackout. Controlling the aircraft is impossible. Heavy gasping from Lao Zhao comes through the radio, mixed with the piercing beep of the alarms. Lao Zhao's voice is distorted by the G-force. "Engineer Chen, I have lost control. The RPM is gone. I can't pull up." Lao Li is drenched in sweat. He grabs the intercom and roars, "La Zhou, it is a lost cause. You are losing altitude too fast. You can't recover from this. Prepare to eject. Bail out now." The young technicians nearby are so terrified. They cover their faces, unable to look at the screen. According to protocol, if a jet enters a spin below 5,000 meters, the pilot must abandon the aircraft. Chen Zheng suddenly lunges forward. He shouts, "Don't jump." He snatches the microphone from Lao Li, staring at the screen. "If this plane crashes, 6 months of our hard work goes down the drain. La Zhou, listen to my command. Pull that plane back for me." Lao Li was jumping up and down in a panic. He shouted, "Chen Zheng, have you lost your mind? This is a high-altitude flat spin. Even God himself could not pull it out of this. Do you want to get Lao Zhao killed?" Chen ignored him completely. A chime echoed in his mind. The system activated instantly. "System alert. Fighter jet has entered a complex spin state. Reading current altitude, air pressure, wind speed, and engine RPM. Current intake pressure is below 0.3 standard atmospheres. Turbine RPM has dropped below the safety line. Data modeling complete. Simulating the ultimate recovery path." Countless streams of data flashed before Chen's eyes. A normal pilot's experience on the plateau is useless under this kind of air pressure. If he tries to pull the stick against the rotation, the air is too thin to provide any aerodynamic force. It would only lead to a faster death. The only way is to go with the flow. Use the falling speed to force air into the intake. Find that split-second window where the engine can bite the air again. 1 second later, the system gave the only way out. Chen Zheng barked orders into the microphone. "Tell Lao Zhao to take his hands off the ejection ring. Release the throttle now. Stomp the right rudder all the way down. Push the control stick in the direction of the spin." The moment those words came out, the entire control tower went dead silent. Lao Li stared at Chen Zheng with wide eyes, as if he were a lunatic. Pushing the stick with the spin, Lao Li's heart was racing with doubt. Does he think the plane is not falling fast enough? Standard procedure is to apply force in the opposite direction. Chen's command is the complete opposite of everything we know. High in the air, Lao Jiao felt like his internal organs were being ripped out. The seatbelts dug deep into his shoulders. Even breathing was difficult. His vision was a total blur. But he heard Chen Zheng's incredibly steady voice. Gritting his teeth, Lao Jiao said, "I trust you." He released the throttle. He slammed his right foot hard on the rudder. Both hands gripped the stick, following the plane's movement. He slammed it all the way into the direction of the spin. In that instant, the fighter jet's descent speed accelerated violently. It hurtled toward the ground like a crazed spinning top. 4,000 meters, 3,500 meters, 3,000 meters. The altitude numbers on the radar were plummeting insanely. Alarms were screaming in a chorus of chaos. The snowy peaks on the ground loomed large in Lao Jiao's eyes, stabbing straight toward him. Even if he wanted to eject now, there was not enough altitude left. Lao Li was so frantic he was almost in tears. He cried out, "Chen, the altitude is too low. He is going to hit the mountain." Chen leaned both hands on the console. He stared fixedly at the system's countdown. 3, 2, 1. Chen Zheng roared into the mic. "No. Center the stick. Push the throttle to the max. Pull up." Lao Jiao let out a thunderous roar in the sky. The muscles in his arms bulged. He slammed the control stick back to center. With his left hand, he shoved the throttle to the wall. 2,500 meters. 2,000 meters. Just as the fighter jet was 2,000 meters from the snowy peak, the point of no return, the airflow gathered from the spin-induced dive, rammed into the intake at a precise, extreme angle. At the system's optimal RPM, the single crystal cooling blades bit hard into that life-saving breath of air. A massive roar erupted from the tail of the fighter jet. The engine, which had previously flamed out, instantly spewed out a tongue of fire over 10 meters long. The powerful thrust felt like a violent shove from behind, slamming hard into the aircraft. The jet jolted violently in mid-air, stopping its deadly stall. Enormous G-force instantly crushed down on Lao Jiao, turning his vision black, nearly knocking him unconscious on the spot. But he bit his tongue hard to stay awake, his hands gripping the control stick in a deathly clutch. Under the tug of the immense thrust, the nose of the plane forced its way up. The belly of the jet nearly grazed the peak of the highest snowy mountain as it flew over, kicking up a whirlwind of ice and snow. The fighter jet roared as it soared back into the sky. The crowd, drenched in cold sweat, broke into a wild celebration. 20 minutes later, when the tires slammed hard onto the runway, skidding with thick clouds of white smoke, the drag chute deployed from the tail with a snap, dragging the aircraft to a steady halt. As soon as the canopy opened, the ground crew swarmed toward the plane like bees. The test pilot, Lao Jiao, did not even wait for the ladder. He slid directly down the wing to the ground. Both of his legs were still trembling uncontrollably, causing him to stumble for a couple of steps. His entire body was shivering, but his eyes were incredibly bright. Lao Jiao shoved aside the doctor coming to support him. Without even taking off his helmet, he strode toward the command center. Chen Zheng had just stepped down from the tower and had not even found his footing when Lao Jiao lunged at him like a black bear, hugging him in a crushing grip. Lao Jiao's palms, hard as sledgehammers, slapped Chen Zheng's back painfully. He shouted, "Well done, kid. You have really got something. This engine is absolutely exhilarating." At that altitude just now, that tailspin was a dead end. If it were the old models or those foreign imports we bought, I would have been a goner on that snowy mountain today. This engine of yours literally dragged me back from the clutches of death. Lao Jiao's eyes were red, and his voice was trembling. He said, "When I gave it fuel, it gave me power. Not a single hitch. As soon as the throttle moved, the thrust followed immediately. This is the kind of gear we pilots can actually trust with our lives." Chen smiled and patted Lao Jiao on the shoulder, asking if he was hurt. Lao Jiao barked, "Hurt my foot." That was a rush. A total rush. He pulled open his collar, gasping for air. He said, "With this kind of thrust, we won't have to back down from anyone in the sky." Inside the control tower, things had already descended into chaos. General Li, the military representative, was clutching the newly printed datasheet, the paper crinkling under his grip. Standing nearby were several experts from the inspection team, who had always insisted that buying was better than building. Their leader, Engineer Liu, who usually boasted about foreign data, was now craning his neck to look at the report. His face turned from pale to flushed. General Li slammed the report heavily onto the table. He said, "Look at this. Everyone, take a good look." At an altitude of 5,000 meters, with intake distortion at its limit, not only did the engine not flame out, it completed a mid-air relight within 3 seconds. The extreme high-altitude restart time was 2.8 seconds. The maximum thrust ran at peak frequency for a full 2 minutes, and every temperature indicator stayed well within the safety margin. Engineer Liu leaned in for a closer look. He pushed up his glasses, his brow furrowed into a tight knot. He muttered, This data can't be right. The foreign F-404 engine. In this high-altitude, low-oxygen environment, thrust dropped by at least 20%. How did our unit only drop by 8%? Chen Zheng strides into the control tower and joins the conversation. He says it is because we used single crystal hollow cooling blades. Our heat resistance limit is a full 200 degrees higher than theirs. I have also recalibrated the combustion chamber intake airflow. Oxygen is scarce at high altitudes, so I forced it to gulp down more air. Engineer Liu is still not convinced. He grinds his teeth looking for a flaw. He asks, but how can you guarantee the lifespan of these materials? Under such extreme operation, the blades will definitely give out. General Li's eyes widen in anger. He stabs his finger right in front of Engineer Liu's nose. He shouts, lifespan? It passed the 150-hour hell test with flying colors, and you are still bringing up lifespan to me. You people. Single quote, have been kneeling for so long you have forgotten how to stand up. Every day it is better to buy than build, and better to rent than buy. Now those foreigners won't even sell us a single core component, and you are still expecting them to show us some charity. Engineer Liu shrinks back from the scolding, unable to squeeze out a single word. General Li turns around. He firmly grasps Chen Zheng's shoulders. His grip is incredibly strong. He says, Chen Zheng, you have achieved something monumental. The real-world flight results of this engine are right here. They are worth more than any laboratory data. This is the ultimate anchor for our Air Force. General Li turns to look at everyone. He raises his voice to announce, I am stating the military's position. This engine model, single quote, has cleared every single test. I will submit the report as soon as I return. We go into full mass production immediately. Fire up every production line in the plant. If you need men, you will get men. If you need money, you will get money. Priority goes to equipping our frontline units. Half a month later, the grand auditorium of the Red Star mechanical plant. The entire plant has shut down for half a day. A massive red banner with yellow lettering hangs over the main gate. Over 4,000 workers in faded white uniforms pack the auditorium to the rafters. The corridors outside are also overflowing with people. On the main stage, General Li personally pins a ceremonial red rosette, as big as a wash basin, onto Chen Zheng's chest. General Li says, Comrade Chen Zheng, you have earned this. General Li stuffs a thick manila envelope and a set of brass keys into Chen's hands. The higher-ups approved a special bonus. This is 100,000 yuan and a 3-bedroom, 100-square-meter apartment in the plant's newly built staff housing block. Take these keys and go open your new door. The audience below simply erupts. In an era where monthly wages are only dozens of yuan and meat requires coupons, 100,000 yuan is an astronomical figure. Yet not a single person is green with envy. Everyone is clapping with all their might. Their palms are bright red from cheering, and the thunderous applause makes ears ring. The old director sits in the front row. He grips the hand of an old technician next to him, shoulders trembling as he sobs, old friend, we finally made it through. Remember when we begged foreigners just to glance at their blueprints? They chased us away like we were beggars. But today, single quote, we have built a world-class engine of our own. A few young workers lead the chant, shouting for a speech. Engineer Chen, say a few words. Chen Zheng walks up to the microphone, looking at the rows of shining eyes below. He ignores his script and speaks directly, regarding this money. Single quote, I am taking half of the bonus out. I will distribute it among our brothers working the shifts on the workshop floor. Without you all guarding those high-temperature furnaces day and night, we could never have cast these single crystal blades. The eyes of the workers below the stage turned red with emotion. A few young men shouted at the top of their lungs, praising Chen Zheng's loyalty. Chen waved his hand to signal everyone to be quiet. He said, I won't keep the remaining half for myself either. Every cent goes directly into our plant's R&D fund. Today, we successfully built this engine. The military has even approved it for mass production. However, can we afford to just rest on our laurels and sleep? Chen Zheng pointed toward the gate and roared, absolutely not. Foreign aircraft are still innovating and evolving. This engine of ours, at most, only catches up to their current level. If we are going to do this, we will build something they would not even dare to dream of. From now on, we are going to make those foreigners eat our dust. The old director stood up. He took the lead with a thunderous shout. Excellent. The entire auditorium erupted in excitement. Over 4,000 people stood up in unison. Wave after wave of applause thundered through the hall, shaking the very dust off the ceiling. The celebration lasted until nightfall, before everyone finally dispersed. Chen Zheng returned to his office alone. He took off the ceremonial red flower and set it aside. He switched on his desk lamp and pulled out a fresh, crisp sheet of drafting paper. The current thrust-to-weight ratio of 9 is enough for now, but for the future of aerial combat, our fighters' maneuverability is still far from where it needs to be. Traditional 2D nozzles are too clunky. I must find a way to break through. As he was lost in thought, the door was suddenly slammed open with a bang. The old director and the military representative, Lao Zhang, strode in. Lao Zhang's face was as dark as a soot-covered pot. He slapped several freshly developed photos onto Chen Zheng's desk. In a voice heavy with urgency, Lao Zhang said, "Chen Zheng, take a look at this." Chen Zheng picked up the photos. They were a bit blurry, but he could clearly make out a foreign, experimental aircraft. The most striking part was the tail of the engine. The nozzle was not circular. It was a flat rectangle, and it was actually bending downward. "This is top-secret intelligence that was just smuggled back." Lao Zhang's hand trembled as he pointed at the photo. "The foreigners. They have developed a nozzle that can move up and down. It is called thrust vectoring. With this, while the plane is flying, the nose can pitch up in an instant. Even if it loses all airspeed, it won't stall and fall." Lao Zhang gestured a high angle of attack. "They call this post-stall maneuverability. If our pilots encounter a monster like this, missiles won't be able to lock on, and they won't even get close to the exhaust. They will be nothing but sitting ducks." The old director paced the room, wringing his hands in anxiety. He said, "Superiority has issued a dead-set order. Whatever the foreigners have, we must have too. Chen Zheng, our new engine project has just been established. The thrust is there, but the maneuverability is lacking. Can we add this technology to it?" Chen Zheng stared at the photos for a moment, then tossed them back on the desk with a cold smirk. "Why would we add that junk? What the foreigners made is a 2D rectangular nozzle. It is incredibly heavy, and it forces you to sacrifice over 10% of your thrust." Lao Zhang's eyes widened. "If we do not add it, how are we supposed to fight them?" Chen Zheng grabbed the blueprints he had started the night before and spread them across the desk. He slammed his hand down and said, "Fight them. If we are going to do this, we are going for a total dimensional strike." He pointed to the cylindrical structure on the blueprint and said, "We are not going to build that clumsy 2D nozzle like the foreigners did. We are going straight for a 3D omnidirectional axisymmetric vector nozzle. Up, down, left, right. A full 360-degree rotation at will." The room fell dead silent. Just then, Deputy Chief Engineer Lao Li walked in to deliver some files. Hearing those words, his foot slipped, and he nearly took a nasty spill. He rushed over and leaned over the table to inspect the blueprints. After 2 glances, his head started shaking like a rattle drum. He waved his hands dismissively over and over. Lao Li said, "No way, absolutely not. Chen Zheng, you are biting off way more than you can chew with this step." Lao Li pointed at the dense clusters of adjustment flaps on the blueprint. His face turned red with anxiety as he spoke. "Do you have any idea why the foreigners are sticking so stubbornly to 2D? Because 2D nozzles only use 2 large plates, top and bottom. The load-bearing surface is large and easy to control. But this 3D design of yours, it is a cylinder made of dozens of small metal scales. If you want it to twist up, down, left, and right, those dozens of tiny pieces will constantly squeeze and rub against each other." Lao Li continued, "When the engine is at full throttle, the exhaust temperature hits over 1,000 degrees, and the thrust reaches over 10 tons. When you deflect that nozzle, that massive force will crush every single metal joint. High heat, high pressure, plus torque. It will cause extreme metal fatigue, without a doubt." Lao Li slammed the table and roared, "We did a simulation like this before. As soon as the thrust hit level 9, the joints were instantly deformed and shredded like pulled silk. In the end, it just shattered into dust. You dare to put this thing in the sky. The moment the pilot pushes the throttle, the nozzle will disintegrate on the spot and blow the tail right off the plane. You are gambling with the test pilot's life." Lao Zhao and the director broke into a cold sweat just listening. The director swallowed hard and tried to persuade him, "Chen Zheng, can we just take it one steady step at a time? Let us make a 2D one to get by first. Rome was not built in a day. Do not try to run before you can walk." Chen said, "Getting by won't cut it." Chen Zheng stood up. He strode over to the large blackboard in the office. Ding! A sound rang out in his mind. System simulation, full power activated. System, importing 3D omnidirectional vector nozzle parameters. Commencing structural stress simulation under extreme operating conditions. System alert. Traditional linkage structures will suffer metal fatigue fracture after 1.2 seconds of stress. Initiating optimization protocols immediately. Calculating stress distribution paths. Generating optimal solution for a stress dispersing ring structure. Countless data points and 3D models swirled frantically in Chen's mind. The red high-risk stress points rapidly transformed into a safe green structure. Chen Zheng picked up a piece of chalk. He drew a large circle on the blackboard. Then he drew a ring of small nodes outside that circle. Chen said, "Engineer Li, you are right. Putting 10 tons of pressure on a single joint is asking for trouble. It will definitely shatter under that brute force." Chen Zheng spoke while he drew. The chalk clicked sharply against the board. "But we are not going to fight it with brute force. We are going to divert the load." Chen said, "Look here. This is called a stress dispersing ring." Chen Zheng drew 2 heavy lines over the large circle. "We add a special load-bearing ring around the outside of the nozzle. When the thrust hits, we do not let a single joint take the hit. When the nozzle deflects upward, the bottom adjustment flaps take the maximum force. At that moment, The dispersing ring will follow these connecting rods and instantly transfer the load to the upper flaps and the outer casing. Chen Zheng turned to Lao Li and said, "Pull one hair and the whole body moves. We are making the whole engine share the burden. The force is no longer concentrated on a single point. Instead, it is evenly distributed across dozens of components through this ring. It is just like an umbrella, no matter how strong the wind is. With dozens of ribs bearing the load together, the canopy won't flip inside out." Old Li stared at the sketch on the blackboard, his brow furrowed into a tight knot. He grabbed the calculator on the table and said, "The theory sounds great, but what about the actual data? This involves non-linear equations with hundreds of variables. If the torque is off by even a millimeter, the balance is gone, and it will still fall apart. Without a mainframe computer, it would take you until the cows come home to calculate this by hand." Chen Zheng let out a cold chuckle and said, "We do not need a computer. I will calculate it for you right now." Data from the system flowed through his mind like a waterfall. Chen Zheng turned around, his pen flying across the board. Line after line of complex formulas and stress parameters appeared on the blackboard. Maximum deflection angle, 15 degrees. Thrust loss controlled within 3%. Dispersion ring thickness, 12.5 millimeters. For material, use the single crystal high-temperature alloy we just developed. Maximum stress on each adjustment vane shall not exceed 400 megapascals, well within the metal fatigue limit. Chalk dust showered down. As Chen wrote, sweat pouring down his face. The blackboard was soon full. He took the chalk and continued writing directly on the white wall next to it. A whole wall of formulas was enough to make anyone's head spin. Old Li was unconvinced at first, clicking away furiously on his calculator. But after following for 2 steps, his movements slowed down. Halfway through, sweat began to bead on his forehead. He simply tossed the calculator aside and grabbed an abacus, clicking the beads rapidly. Several technicians, hearing the commotion, crowded at the door, holding their notebooks and calculating along, drenched in sweat. The only sounds left in the office were the scratching of pencils and heavy breathing. After more than an hour of calculations, the pencil in Old Li's hand snapped with a loud crack. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared intently at the final force balance result on the wall. He slumped into his chair, his lips trembling. Old Li's voice cracked with emotion as he said, "It is balanced. Single quote, the load is perfectly balanced." He grabbed the director's arm and exclaimed, "The force is entirely absorbed by this ring. The stress on every single adjustment vane is kept within the safety threshold. The metal fatigue issue." Single quote, he actually solved it. The technicians at the door erupted in excitement. Someone shouted, "This is brilliant. This design is absolutely god tier." Another yelled, "A 3D omnidirectional nozzle. If we build this, those foreigners' 2D nozzles won't mean squat." Lao Zhang slammed his palm on the table, making the teacups rattle. The gloom on his face vanished as he said, "Good lad, Chen Zheng, the military will give you full support. Whatever manpower you need, you will get it. You must build this thing for me." The old director's face wrinkled up with a huge grin. With a wave of his hand, he said, "Let us do it. We are going to build this 3D nozzle." Chen Zheng tossed the remaining chalk stub into the bin, clapped the white dust off his hands, and let out a long breath. However, a few days later, when the director returned from a trip to the capital, his face was as dark as thunder. The director kicked open the office door, slammed his briefcase onto the table, and fumed, "Those foreign devils have gone too far." Lao Zhang quickly handed him some water and asked, "What happened?" "We could not buy the 5-axis machine tools." The director slammed the cup onto the table, splashing water everywhere. "Buy them, my foot," they said. Single quote, 5-axis CNC machine tools are strategic resources. They are specifically designed to bottleneck our military industry. Forget about new ones. Even if it is a piece of junk ready for the scrap heap, they would rather smash it into scrap metal and melt it down than sell us a single screw. The old director grew more furious as he spoke, his eyes turning bloodshot with rage. He mentioned that foreign agent named Smith, who sat there with his legs crossed, smoking a cigar, mocking him with a sarcastic tone. Smith said that holding the blueprints for a 3D vector nozzle was like pinning a poster on the wall, just something to look at. He even claimed we could not machine a single decent part, mocking us to just pack up and go back to farming. The office became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. General Li sighed, clutching his hair in frustration. He asked, "How on earth are we going to fix this? The divergent flaps of that vector nozzle. The curved surfaces are incredibly complex. They are full of irregular curvatures. The ancient 3-axis machines in our plant, they are fine for simple straight cuts, but they can't machine that kind of 3D curved surface at all. Without a 5-axis machine, no matter how good the blueprints are, they are just scrap paper." Several technicians lowered their heads, faces full of humiliation. Chen Zheng stepped forward and opened his briefcase. He spoke coldly, "If they won't sell, then they won't sell. Do they really think that without their pile of scrap metal, we are just going to roll over and die? If we do not have 5-axis machines, We will just modify one ourselves. General Li's eyes widened in shock. He asked Chen Zheng, modify it ourselves. Young Chen, do not joke around. 5-axis machines are their crown jewels. The mechanical structure and the CNC system inside. We have never even laid hands on them. Chen Zheng asked, who said we are building it from scratch? He grabbed a sheet of paper and began sketching rapidly with a pencil. He said, doesn't our plant have several imported 3-axis machines? The X, Y, and Z linear axes already exist. We just need to add a physical cradle to the workbench. Specifically, the A and C rotary axes. Mount them on. The machine handles the linear movement. The cradle handles the rotation. And boom, you have got a 5-axis machine. The technicians crowded around to take a look. Their eyes lit up instantly. General Li said adding a cradle is not the hard part. We can find Master Wang, the grade 8 fitter. Using the best steel to weld one would be no problem at all. But then his brow furrowed into a tight knot. He said, the real killer is the CNC system. A 3-axis brain can't control 5-axis legs. Even if we add the cradle, the machine's computer won't recognize the 2 new axes. How can they possibly coordinate? Another technician slapped his thigh in frustration. He said the low-level system code is locked down. We can't even modify it. Chen Zheng set his pencil down firmly. He said, if it is locked, we will break it open. I will leave the hardware to you guys. I will handle the software. I will rewrite the kernel driver code and trick the 3-axis system. I will make it think it is following a linear path, while it is actually controlling the cradle's rotation. Everyone was stunned. Handwriting 5-axis linkage kernel code, tricking a 3-axis into a 5-axis. One single error in the code, and the cutter head would smash the machine to pieces. Chen did not waste any more breath. He turned around and headed straight for the computer room. For the next 5 days and 5 nights, the entire plant went into a frenzy. Master Wang, the grade 8 fitter, worked shirtless. The welding torch spits out a blue flame. Leading his apprentice, they forcefully weld thick steel plates together, creating a cradle platform capable of precise rotation. Chen Zheng locks himself in the computer room. Piles of manuscripts, half as tall as a man, stack up before him. He closes his eyes. In his mind, the system interface lights up. System prompt, initiating low-level CNC logic deduction. Objective, equipping a 3-axis machine with A and C-axis rotation to achieve 5-axis simultaneous linkage. Next, generating inverse kinematics algorithms. Massive streams of data flood through Chen's mind like a rapid fire. The 3-axis system is a closed loop. It is like an idiot who does not understand a word you say. What Chen needs to do is write a translator, deconstructing complex 5-axis commands into something even an idiot can grasp. 3-axis linear movement plus cradle rotation. Line after line of complex tool compensation algorithms and inverse kinematic formulas are derived. Chen Zheng transforms the results into low-level machine code. His fingers fly across the keyboard. The letters on the keys are practically worn away. When hungry, he gnaws on cold buns. When tired, he splashes his face with ice-cold water. The morning of the 6th day, the rugged, sturdy physical cradle stands perfectly upright. It is mounted onto the old 3-axis machine tool. Chen Zheng, sporting heavy dark circles under his eyes, walks out of the room holding the punched CNC paper tape. Chen's voice is as raspy as if he would swallowed sand. He says the code is ready. Load the machine. Start the trial cut. The workshop is packed with people. Director Wang, Lao Zhao, Lao Wang, and all the technical backbone are here. Everyone is holding their breath in anticipation. A silver-gray TC4 titanium alloy block. The blank is firmly clamped onto the cradle. This stuff is incredibly hard, extremely difficult to machine. Chen Zheng feeds the paper tape into the machine's reader. He steps up to the control panel. Director Wang is so nervous, his palms are sweating. He asks Chen if he is sure about this. Chen takes a deep breath. He says as long as the tool does not break, we can cut it out. His thumb presses firmly down on the green start button. With a sharp hum, the spindle motor growls. The high-speed milling cutter lets out a piercing shriek. The wind from it nears the titanium alloy blank. Milky white coolant sprays out, drenching the tool head. Everyone's heart is in their throat. The moment the tool head contacts the metal, sparks and coolant fly everywhere. Lao Wang shouts in a low voice, the cradle is moving. Under the control of Chen's code, the heavy physical cradle tilts to an angle with extreme smoothness. The tool head, which could only move straight, follows the cradle's rotation, carving a graceful arc into the titanium alloy. 3-axis linear motion perfectly coordinated with 2-axis rotation. True 5-axis simultaneous linkage. The tool head glides across complex curved surfaces. It is like carving art onto metal. Layer after layer of titanium chips fall away. As it cuts toward the thinnest edge, the machine suddenly shudders violently. A sharp clink sounds out. The tool head emits a piercing scream. A massive spray of sparks bursts outward. Lao Wang spots it instantly. He shouts in a panic, something's wrong. The cutting load is too high. The tool is going to shatter. System alarms blare inside Chen's head. Optimized feed parameters pop up immediately. He does not even look. His right hand grabs the feed rate knob and cranks it down hard, forcing the feed speed to drop. Simultaneously, his left hand taps rapidly on the panel, adjusting the compensation parameters. The vibration noise vanishes instantly. The tool head steadily cuts through the most dangerous edge. Continues smooth cutting. Everyone broke into a cold sweat. Fists clenched, they stared intently. For 2 whole hours. In the workshop, besides the roar of the machinery, no one dared to speak a word. Finally finished, the main spindle slowed to a halt. The coolant stopped spraying. The bay door opened. Heat dissipated into the air, glistening with a cold metallic luster. A vector control vane lay in the cradle. The curvature was perfect. The surface was as smooth as a mirror, just like a real dragon scale. Lao Li held the micrometer. His hands were shaking like a leaf. He stepped up to measure it again and again, measuring the front and then the back. His eyes were practically glued to the part. Director Wang was so anxious he was stomping his feet. He asked, "How is it?" Lao Li turned around, his eyes rimmed with red. He roared at the top of his lungs, 0.01 millimeters. Not a hair's breadth of difference. Precision is perfectly on spec. The workshop immediately erupted in cheers that nearly blew the roof off. Several young technicians hugged and jumped for joy. Lao Jiao grabbed Chen Zheng, tears streaming down his face. He said, "Good job, kid. You have really broken the foreign blockade. We have manufactured our own 5-axis parts." The scene shifts to a flight test base in the Great Northwest. In the center of the apron sat a prototype aircraft, coated in silver-gray anti-rust paint. At first glance, the plane looked ordinary, but walk around to the tail, and you would see the real masterpiece. The original cylindrical engine nozzle was gone, replaced by dozens of metal vanes, forming a brand new nozzle. The metal plates shimmered with a cold light, layer upon layer of these metal plates, arranged just like dragon scales. This was the treasure Chen Zheng and his team worked day and night to create, a 3D omnidirectional thrust vectoring nozzle. The observation deck was filled with high-ranking military officials. The top commanders sat in the front row. Holding binoculars, they stared fixedly at the apron. A stern-faced general put down his binoculars. He turned to the president of the Flight Test Academy. "Is this thing really as incredible as Chen Zheng's report claimed?" President Liu wiped his sweat and gave a dry laugh. "General, you know that kid, Chen. When has he ever let us down? He said he can make the plane dance in the sky. Let us just sit back and enjoy the show today." The atmosphere in the control tower was tense. Several gray-haired experts stared at the screens. They hardly dared to breathe. This was Dragon Nation's first engine with a vectoring nozzle. If it jammed in mid-air, or if a vane shattered under high temperature and pressure, it would be a catastrophic crash. Chen Zheng stood at the console, hands on the table, eyes on the radar. There was not a hint of panic on his face. He was as steady as a rock. Inside his mind, the system dinged. Airframe scan complete. Vector nozzle connection, normal. Hydraulic system pressure, normal. Takeoff authorized. Chen Zheng grabbed the intercom and commanded loudly, "This is the tower. All data is normal. You are cleared for takeoff." The voice of test pilot Lao Lei came through the headset. "01, Roger. Preparing for takeoff." On the runway, the prototype's tail suddenly spewed a tongue of deep blue flame as thrust increased. The scale-covered nozzle actually contracted and narrowed like a living thing. A violent torrent of airflow erupted. The force shook the ground, sending pebbles flying everywhere. Or, the engine let out a thunderous explosion of power. The test aircraft rocketed down the runway for several hundred meters. Its nose pitched up, piercing straight through the clouds. It rapidly climbed to an altitude of 5,000 meters. Lao Lei first tested the barrel rolls and loops. He performed several basic inverted flight maneuvers. Data points flickered across the control tower monitors one by one. Engine temperature, normal. Oil pressure, normal. Nozzle deflection angle, normal. No signs of mechanical lag. Several senior experts let out long sighs of relief. Their tense shoulders finally relaxed. But Chen Zheng knew the real show was just beginning. He had not invited the top brass here today, just to watch a routine performance. He stood up and grabbed the microphone. His voice carried a hint of fierce determination. "Warm-up is over. Disconnect the angle of attack limiter. Prepare to enter post-stall maneuverability testing." The control tower suddenly fell deathly silent. The senior experts whipped their heads around to stare at Chen Zheng. Their eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. One senior expert slammed his hand on the table in a panic. "Engineer Chen, attempting post-stall maneuvers on the very first test flight. This is far too dangerous. If he can't recover from the stall, the plane will drop right out of the sky." Chen Zheng did not even turn his head. His eyes were locked onto the radar screen. "Have faith in our nozzles. Follow my command. Prepare for the Cobra." There was not a hint of hesitation in Lao Lei's headset. "01, Roger. AOA limiter disconnected." On the viewing platform, the generals also sensed something was off. The aircraft suddenly leveled off in the sky. Its speed began to bleed away. The stern-faced general frowned. What is that boy up to? 5,000 meters up. Lao Lei took a deep breath. His right hand gripped the stick and yanked it all the way back. At that exact moment, the vector nozzles at the tail pitched upward. They deflected at a massive angle. The high-temperature exhaust flow redirected instantly. A colossal force slammed the tail downward. The nose of the test aircraft reared up instantly. 30 degrees. 110 degrees. The entire plane looked like an enraged king cobra. It stood bolt upright in mid-air. The belly was completely exposed to the wind. Speed dropped from 400 kilometers per hour to barely over 100 in the blink of an eye. In the past, this would have been a death sentence. A normal plane at this pitch angle would have lost all control. Lift would vanish, and it would drop like a lead weight. The system in Chen Zheng's mind was calculating frantically. Lines of green data flashed past. Attitude angle, 110 degrees. Deep stall entered. Vector thrust compensation initiated. Attitude maintained. In the middle of the sky, the aircraft relied solely on the raw power of its engine. Precise vector nozzle deflection and massive thrust held up the massive fuselage. It looked as if it were levitating in the air. It stayed suspended for a full 3 to 4 seconds. Everyone on the viewing platform was shell-shocked. The stern general nearly dropped his binoculars. His mouth was hanging wide open. Director Liu rubbed his eyes and stammered, "My God. The plane is standing on its tail." He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Back in the control tower, all hell broke loose. The senior experts pointed at the screen, their hands shaking like they would been electrocuted. 3 seconds later, Chen Zheng shouted into the microphone, "Switch." Lao Lei slammed the control stick forward. The vector nozzle immediately deflected downward. The tail of the aircraft was violently lifted. In a mid-air cobra maneuver, the nose of the plane suddenly snapped back down. It instantly regained level flight. A long trail of exhaust blasted from the tail as it accelerated away with immense power. The entire maneuver was flawless. Absolute perfection. The observation deck erupted in cheers loud enough to bring the roof down. Several high-ranking commanders stood up in excitement, clapping furiously. Their palms were turning red from the force. The stern-faced commander slapped his thigh hard. He exclaimed, "That move was god tier. If an enemy plane is tailing us, single quote, and we pull a stunt like that, single quote, the sudden drop in speed, single quote, will send the enemy flying right past us. Offense and defense are reversed in an instant." Inside the control tower, the veteran experts embraced each other, their eyes welling up with tears. The corner of Chen Zheng's mouth curled into a smirk, but it was not over yet. He wanted those foreigners, who looked down on the Dragon Nation's aviation industry, to understand exactly what a true dimensional strike looks like. Chen Zheng asked into the mic, "O1, how's it feeling?" Lao Lei's voice was brimming with pure ecstasy. "Tower, this is O1 reporting. The plane feels like an extension of my own hand. It is incredibly responsive. Thrust is available exactly when I need it." Chen Zheng's eyes turned cold as he said, "Good. Don't give them a moment to breathe. Let us serve the main course. Show them what we have really got." Chen Zheng gave the command, "Prepare for the J-turn. Force the fighter into a snap 180. Lao Lei replied, "O1, copy that." High in the sky, the demonstrator aircraft, having just resumed level flight, pulled its nose up again. This time, the plane did not just hover vertically. Instead, at the exact moment its speed hit rock bottom, Lao Lei kicked the rudder pedal all the way to the floor. Simultaneously, the system in Chen Zheng's mind was running at full power. It instantly transmitted the optimal deflection parameters to the engine. The right nozzle deflected upward by 15 degrees. Differential thrust engaged. In mid-air, the scaled nozzles at the tail of the fighter twisted violently into a complex configuration. With almost zero forward airspeed, the aircraft pivoted around its tail as the axis. It drew a tiny semicircle in the sky, right where it stood. The nose snapped around 180 degrees instantly. It was like a person spinning around on their heels. Immediately after, the engine let out a deafening roar. The fighter lunged back in the direction it had just come from. The entire about-face took less than 2 seconds. The turning radius was so small, it was practically negligible. A deathly silence fell over the observation deck. Everyone was stunned senseless by this scene that defied common sense. It took several seconds before anyone remembered to breathe, gasping in shock. The military top brass who knew their stuff felt their scalps go numb. Cold sweat broke out across their backs. In close quarters aerial combat, whoever points their nose at the enemy first, fires first. Previously, turning a plane around required a wide, sweeping arc, but now, equipped with vector nozzles, this demonstrator could pull a 180 on a dime. If this were a real battlefield, before the enemy could even react, our missiles would already be locked onto their foreheads. This is not an air battle. This is a one-sided slaughter. The stern-faced commander muttered, "It is invincible. Single quote, within dogfight range. Single quote, "This aircraft is invincible." His hands gripped the railing in front of him with a death grip. His knuckles were turning white from the pressure. Inside the tower, Chen Zheng looked at the perfect flight path on the radar. He let out a long, heavy breath of relief. It is a success. Dragon Nation's fighters have finally broken the shackles of aerodynamic design. We truly hold the keys to aerial supremacy now. Chen Zheng lowered the transmitter and said, "01. Single quote, test complete, beautifully done." Returning to base, the demonstrator aircraft performs a beautiful barrel roll in the sky. With a massive roar, it passes at low altitude over the viewing platform. The enormous airflow makes the colored flags flap loudly. The high-ranking leaders are so moved, their eyes turn red. As soon as the demonstrator lands, the military immediately places the base under lockdown. But the foreign satellites flying above are not blind. That move where it turned on a dime, combined with the extraordinary maneuverability data, simply cannot be hidden. In less than 3 days, the Western aviation world has been thrown into an absolute frenzy. No one ever expected that the Dragon Nation, the one they always looked down on, the one that could not even figure out second-generation aircraft, would quietly develop a 3D omnidirectional vector nozzle. This is a top-tier technology that Western giants are still scratching their heads over in their labs. The West's biggest aero-engine monopoly, Pulo Aerospace, was the first to lose its cool. If the Dragon Nation starts mass-producing this technology, the global meal ticket they have held for decades will be smashed to pieces. On the morning of the 4th day, a private jet lands in the capital. Pulo Aerospace's Vice President Smith, leading a senior negotiation team, rushes in a panic to the Aviation Research Institute. The atmosphere in the meeting room is cold enough to freeze water. Smith sits across the long table, dressed in a sharp suit, with his chin held high in the air. He looks like a man who is used to throwing his weight around. He does not even bother with pleasantries, directly signaling his assistant to throw a contract, written entirely in English, onto the middle of the table. Smith leans back in his chair and says with a smirk, "Mr. Chen, we have reviewed your test flight data. This little toy you have put together is passable." Smith continues, "But then again, with the Dragon Nation's manufacturing standards, you can only hand-hammer a single prototype in a lab. As for mass production, you would not even know where to begin." Chen sits opposite him, tapping his fingers on the table with a cold smile. "So, did Mr. Smith travel all this way, just to mock us?" Smith leans forward, his eyes full of calculation. "No, I am here out of the goodness of my heart to help you." Smith says, "Pulo Aerospace is willing to invest $100 million to form a joint venture with you, specifically to produce this vector nozzle." Smith raises a finger. "The conditions are simple. Pulo Aerospace will hold a 51% stake, providing all the production funding and equipment. And you only need to contribute all the patent technology for the vector nozzle as your equity." The moment these words are spoken, the Dragon Nation technicians in the room turn red with rage. $100 million for a 51% stake. This is not a joint venture. This is highway robbery, as long as they have absolute controlling interest. How this technology is used, or who gets to use it, will be entirely up to Pulo Aerospace. They could easily lock the patent in a safe and hide it away, ensuring the Dragon Nation's fighters never get to wear this heart. Chen Zheng does not even look at the contract. He shoves it onto the floor and says, "Smith, have you not woken up from your dream yet? The door is right there. Get out." The fake smile on Smith's face vanishes. He stands up abruptly, hands on the table, glaring at Chen Zheng. Raising his voice an octave, he says, "Young man, do not slap the hand that is trying to help you. Do you think having the blueprints means you can actually build the thing?" Smith points at Chen Zheng's nose with an arrogant threat. He says, "For that nozzle to deflect back and forth, you need ultra-high precision hydraulic actuators. Your domestic bearing steel won't last 10 hours before it shatters into pieces. And your ceiling rings, they can't even withstand 500-degree exhaust gas. As for the microcomputer chips for the control nozzles, your country does not even have a decent production line." He spoke with growing smugness. A cold sneer curled his lips as he said, with just one word from Pulo Aerospace, "And we cut off your supply chain for high-end materials and chips. That pathetic nozzle of yours becomes nothing but a pile of scrap metal. It won't even get a chance to take to the skies. Other than forming a joint venture with us, you have no other way out." The faces of the old factory directors from the Dragon Nation turned pale. They knew in their hearts that Smith was telling the truth. The Dragon Nation's industrial foundation was simply too thin. Even if Chen Zheng designed the world's most advanced nozzle, if the supporting material plants and bearing factories could not produce qualified parts, mass production would indeed be impossible. A deputy director leaned close to Chen Zheng's ear. His voice trembling, he whispered, "Engineer Chen, maybe we should renegotiate. If they really put a chokehold on us by cutting off special steel and chip supplies, this entire project will go up in smoke." Chen Zheng gave a cold snort. He pushed the deputy director aside and said, "They are not even worthy." Chen Zheng stood up and unzipped the black briefcase by his feet. Over the past half year, the midnight oil he burned was not just for drawing blueprints. He had anticipated the West would play dirty with the supply chain. Long ago, he had taken every single screw, every block of alloy, and every line of control code needed for the vector nozzle, and ran through the entire process from start to finish. He had even quietly distributed the latest technical formulas to dozens of domestic military plants on the verge of closing, forcing them to upgrade their equipment and production lines overnight. Chen Zheng grabbed a thick stack of documents and slammed them onto the conference table. The impact made the teacups rattle. Chen Zheng pointed at the documents and shouted, "Open your damn eyes and look closely. This is the complete 100% Dragonheart domestic supply chain map." Smith was stunned. Frowning, he motioned for the translator to bring the documents over. Chen Zheng did not give him a moment to breathe. He flipped to the first page and yelled, pointing at the data, "Didn't you say our bearing steel was trash? Look at this. Harbin First Bearing Plant. Using the new heat treatment process I provided. Last month they produced high-carbon chromium stainless steel bearings. Under extreme testing at 20,000 RPM. They ran for 500 consecutive hours without a single crack. They are more durable than your flagship products at Pulo." Smith's eyelid twitched violently. He stared fixedly at the test report handed over by the translator. His expression changed. Chen Zheng flipped ahead a dozen pages. "And about those sealing rings you mentioned," Chen Zheng asked, "who told you we would use rubber?" "The Central Materials Institute used the latest ceramic-based composites to handcraft flexible seals that withstand 2,500 degrees. Chen Zheng said their outdated 500-degree seals could be kept for sealing their own windows at home." Cold sweat broke out on Smith's forehead. He snatched the documents away, though he could not read Chinese. The bright red military inspection stamps all over the pages stung his eyes. Smith shook his head desperately and shouted, "Impossible. This is absolutely impossible." Then he asked, "What about the chips?" Smith said they lacked high-precision flight control chips. Their electronics industry was so backward. How could they possibly write the control logic for 3D vectors? "These documents are fake. They are just bluffing." Chen Zheng cursed, "Fake my foot." He snapped his fingers. Behind him, an assistant immediately brought up a heavy wooden crate. With a loud clang, it was opened. Inside, neatly arranged, were rows of gleaming components, high-precision bearings, black heat-resistant ceramic seal rings, and a palm-sized integrated circuit board. Chen Zheng picked up the circuit board, tossed it right into Smith's lap, and said, "We did not use any Western chip architecture at all. Our domestic electronic institutes use discrete components, combined with the low-level logic code I rewrote myself, to build this flight control motherboard from scratch. Its processing speed is twice as fast as your junk chips, and its anti-interference capability is 3 times stronger." The foreign engineers behind Smith rushed forward, pulling out magnifying glasses and testing instruments to inspect the parts. The more they tested, the more pale their faces became. 2 minutes passed. The lead foreign engineer leaned into Smith's ear, his voice trembling violently. "Boss, this stuff is the real deal. The machining precision error of that bearing is less than 0.001 millimeters. Their technology has completely surpassed ours." Hearing those words, Smith looked as if the life had been sucked out of him. He slumped back into his chair. The material blockade he took such pride in, the big stick he used to threaten Dragon Nation's supply chain, had been smashed to pieces by Chen Zheng. It turned out Dragon Nation had not just developed vector nozzles, but in just a few short months, they had elevated their entire industrial chain to the world's top tier. Chen Zheng leaned his hands on the table, staring down at Smith. Smith had just said that with one word from them, our planes would never take to the skies. Now, Chen Zheng had a word for him too. "Starting today, Dragon Nation's engine production won't need so much as a single screw from you people." Smith panicked completely. He knew very well that once Dragon Nation's full industrial chain started running, Pulo Aerospace's glory days would be over. He quickly forced a smile, rubbing his hands as he stood up. "Mr. Chen, Engineer Chen, let us talk this through. My attitude earlier was out of line. How about this? We can renegotiate the shares. 40-60 split. Or even better, you take the lion's share. We will only take 30% of the profits." Chen Zheng spat out one cold word, "Get out." Smith froze. "Mr. Chen, we are showing real sincerity here." Chen pointed at him, telling him to take his money and that fraudulent contract of theirs, and get the hell off his property immediately. Chen pointed to the gate and shouted, "This technology was forged by us Dragon Nation people, hammer by hammer. Don't even dream of riding our coattails for a single penny." Smith wanted to say more, but the security guards nearby stepped up, grabbed him by the arms, and dragged him out. The other foreign engineers were so terrified, they scrambled to pack their gear, and ran out with their tails between their legs. Watching these foreigners being herded out like ducks, the conference room erupted in thunderous cheers. The old factory directors, who were trembling with fear moments ago, were now wiping tears of joy from their faces. Time skipped forward to the new century. At the Zhuhai International Air Show, the October sun was so hot it distorted the air over the runway. The perimeter of the apron was packed with people. The media zone in the front row was a forest of cameras. A group of foreign engineers wearing Pulo aerospace badges stood together, curling their lips in disdain. A tall foreigner said with a look of contempt, "Have you heard? Dragon Nation is bringing out the stealth fighter they have been hiding for 10 years. Today for a little test drive." A fat man sneered, "Give me a break. A stealth casing is easy enough to cobble together. But the core still relies entirely on the engine. With their meager technology, at most, they are using models we phased out 20 years ago. Without a high-thrust engine, a stealth fighter is just a piece of scrap metal. It can't even fly fast." These foreigners are talking quite loud. Beside them, several gray-haired veterans of Dragon Nation's military industry are glaring in fury. They clench their fists tight but remain silent. For so many years, inferior engines have been a chronic ache in the hearts of Dragon Nation's aviation engineers. Suddenly, the ground jolts violently. A heavy, dull vibration travels through the concrete, surging up through the soles of everyone's feet. The coffee in a foreign reporter's hand spills all over his trousers. Someone asks, "What is going on?" Everyone looks toward the end of the runway. 4 flat, gray silhouettes are taxiing out of the hangar. The fuselage coating does not reflect a single ray of light. The streamlined design lacks a single sharp angle. They look like 4 ghosts gliding across the ground. The entire field falls silent instantly. Not even a cough can be heard. A foreign observer does not even notice his notebook hitting the ground. He gasps, "My God, that shape. It is a full stealth design." As the fighter turns, its tail faces the spectator stands. Those in the know gasp in shock, staring fixedly at the rear of the aircraft. Those are not the old-fashioned straight nozzles. Instead, they are bordered with serrated edges extremely. Sci-fi 3D omnidirectional vector nozzles. The fat executive from Pulo Aerospace nearly has his eyes pop out. He crushes the water bottle in his hand. He stammers, They actually installed vector nozzles. That is impossible. Before the foreigners can snap out of it, all 4 fighters slam the throttles forward simultaneously. No black smoke, no red exhaust flames. The nozzles erupt with 2 pillars of pure ghostly blue fire. The air is ignited by the extreme temperature, emitting a scream like tearing silk. The fighters begin their takeoff roll. 100 meters. Less than 300 meters. The lead plane suddenly pulls its nose up. The fuselage is nearly vertical to the ground. Like a sharp arrow, it pierces straight into the clouds. The Dragon Nation audience erupts in cheers and curses of disbelief. "Holy crap," someone shouts, "that takeoff distance is insane." The veteran engineer, who was fuming earlier, is now flushed with excitement. He bellows at the top of his lungs. The thrust-to-weight ratio is definitely over 10. This is true high-thrust power. The 4 fighters quickly form up in the air before scattering wildly. The lead plane flies level at several thousand meters. Its speed skyrockets. A white sonic boom cloud explodes around the fuselage. A thunderous boom slams into the ground, leaving everyone's ears ringing. A foreign expert clutches his head and screams, "Supersonic cruise." It hit supersonic cruise without even using afterburners. And that is not all. While supersonic, the lead plane pulls the nose up sharply. The tail's vector nozzles deflect rapidly in all directions. The massive heavy fighter seems to slam on the brakes mid-air. The nose pitches up past 120 degrees. The entire aircraft stands upright in the sky. It performs the classic Cobra maneuver mid-air, the famous Pugachev's Cobra, performed by a heavy stealth fighter. The expert from Pulo Aerospace stumbles back, cursing, "Impossible." With such a high angle of attack, the intake airflow should be completely disrupted. The engine should have flamed out long ago. Just how on earth did their compressor withstand such extreme conditions? The fighter jet loses speed. It spins and drops like a falling leaf. The ground is rushing up at an alarming rate. Many spectators close their eyes in terror. Just then, the engine erupts with a thunderous roar. The vector nozzles deflect sharply downward. Monstrous thrust directly lifts the tens of tons of the heavy fighter jet back up. The aircraft levels out in mid-air. Blue flames blast from the rear. With a burst of speed, it charges into the clouds again. The entire maneuver was incredibly smooth, an absolute display of dominance. The foreign engineers who were mocking the Dragon Nation are now dumbstruck. Their mouths hang open, their faces pale as ghosts. They stammer that this completely defies aerodynamics. This is pure, brute engine thrust bullying the laws of physics. Deep down, they know the truth. An engine capable of such maneuvers has left their technology in the dust. In the center of the VIP stands, Chen Zheng sits quietly in a faded old jacket. 20 years have passed. His hair has turned completely white. The wrinkles on his face are etched deep like scars. Today, this section is filled with high-ranking generals and industry titans. But no matter how powerful the leader, when they pass Chen Zheng, they stop in their tracks. They bow respectfully and call him Elder Chen. Chen does not use binoculars to watch the sky. He leans back in his chair with his eyes closed. His ears are tuned to the sound of the jet screaming overhead. There is no rattling or metallic clanking like the old broken bellows. Only a pure, deep roar, like the breathing of a giant beast. This is the heartbeat of the world's finest engine. A ding sounds in his mind. System prompt, ultimate stealth fighter propulsion. Core Dragon Heart, operating at full power. Perfect. System ultimate mission, pillar of the nation, completed. Hearing the notification, Chen slowly opens his eyes. He grips the iron railing in front of him. The veins on the back of his hands bulge. It has been over 20 years. From the explosion on the test bed, to the foreigner pointing at his nose, calling them useless that afternoon. He led his brothers through a dead end with no blueprints or materials. They literally forged a path forward with their very lives, in front of the high-temperature furnaces, to save a critical component. An old worker did not even flinch as the heat tore skin and flesh from his arm. In the snow at 40 degrees below zero. To solve the icing issues, they stood in the freezing wind for half a month. So cold they could not even hold their chopsticks. Years ago, when test pilot Lao Li faced disaster at 10,000 meters, the plane was dropping like a lump of lead. It was the engine they modified overnight that pulled the plane back in the final few hundred meters. When Lao Li landed, his flight suit was soaked with cold sweat, yet he still gave him a smiling thumbs up. Every memory flashes before his eyes like a movie. The foreigners who once mocked them for not being able to make a single screw are now staring at the sky in a daze. Those who tried to strangle their progress, the multinational giants who threatened them with contracts, are now not even fit to carry the shoes of Dragon Nation's aerospace tech. In the sky, 4 heavy stealth fighters regroup. They fly low in a diamond formation, screaming directly over the reviewing stand. The massive roar drowns out everything. The very ground beneath the spectators shakes violently. On the stand, every general and leader, and every researcher stands up as one. Countless eyes overflow with tears. They clap frantically and shout at the top of their lungs. Bravo! What a magnificent flight! Long live the Dragon Nation! Chen Zheng stands up with them. He looks up at the 4 fighters charging into the clouds against the sunlight. The end.